Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of What If Kid Naruto was the first wielder of Death Note. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Light grinned and slowly got to his feet after being startled by the Shinigami's demonic appearance. It didn't help that his room was now dark. In fact, I've been waiting for you, Ryuk, he said. With a chuckle on his face, Ryuk said, "Oh, looks you're an interesting one." Yagami Light, as the young man with brown hair sat idly in his chair and stared at the death note that was placed on his study table. Ryuk's eyes widened slightly as he turned his demonic pupils to the notebook and saw hundreds of names already written on its pages. He said, appearing to be lost in thought, "It seems like you've wasted no time in getting used to my death note, maintaining eye contact with the book. This is the only time I get to spread the sense of proper justice across the world, so every second is precious. I have to attend school, prep classes, study for my upcoming exams, and sleep in between," Light replied, his face serious as he fixed his gaze on the small lamp, the only source of light in the space. "Though he hasn't yet utilized all of my Death Note's effects, he appears to be taking this very seriously. Those eyes speak of a cause and ambition, but they don't seem as bright as his. Instead, they seem dark, completely focused on his objective, and ready to eliminate anyone who stands in his way. This human is fascinating, but I will always remember him. Those were the good old days. When I was a brand new Shinigami, fresh out of the dust, with a weak death note. He was a unique one, I suppose. A real genius. Even after all these years, I still can't forget that child. I still can't believe he went to heaven despite using the death note. Time travel. Nearly 2 millennia ago. Kill this bastard. Fuck you, asshole. Here's for killing my wife and children. Demon spawn." If you were standing in the empty streets nearby, you could hear muffled voices and the sounds of beatings coming from the depths of a dark alley during the full moon's radiant presence over Konoha. When you first enter the alley and make multiple left and right turns, you'll see the abhorrent sight of several middle-aged male civilians forming a mob against the bloodied body of a boy who was curled up in a fetal position. A panting male growled, "Hey, what happened? Huh? Given up already," as he and the others continued to stomp on him with all the strength in their muscles. But he received no response at all, not even a groan escaping the boy's blood-caked lips as he gritted his teeth in agony. Just the sounds of his bones breaking or bending at strange angles. His eyes were closed, his body was sweating profusely, his clothes were soaked in blood, and his blonde hair appeared to be dripping with blood transfusion packs. In the meantime, the civilians started to breathe heavily from exhaustion and their faces started to drip with sweat, and the frequency of their leg stompings decreased. One of them huffed, still kicking the boy, while the others appeared to be at their breaking point. Eventually, they all stopped and turned to leave. Fuck. Oh, I'm tired, the boy exclaimed. One of them said, "It's a shame we can't kill this demon. Hokage. Sama sure is making your life miserable, brat. Why don't you beg for him to just end your torture?" The others laughed and gasped for air. They talked as though this was commonplace as their figures retreated into the alley's darkness. "Hey now, don't say that. Who knows, he might just do that, then who would take his place? I actually enjoy the occasional workout. Now let's get out of here, I need a drink," they said. Returning to the bloodied body lying in his own pool of blood, he tried to move his body with twitching fingers but was met with an electric shock that caused him to grit his teeth in excruciating pain and not want to make even the slightest sound. "It looks like I have a broken left leg, a bent elbow, a fractured jawline, a broken spine, torn muscles, and a lot of bruises. Oh no, boo, too much blood loss. I'm losing consciousness now. Good night, Konoha. I should be up in a few hours." Those were the blonde's final words before he passed out. After several hours, 2 a.m., the blonde boy opened his eyes, licking his lips before squirming at the taste of iron. A groan escaped the dried-up bloody lips. A weary sigh escaped his lips as memories of what had happened before he lost consciousness flooded back to him. "This time, the assholes caught me off guard right after I got back from training and was extremely tired," he thought angrily for a moment before slowly sitting up. He wasn't surprised to find himself lying in a pool of his own blood, or that his clothes, face, and spiky hair were all red. With his injuries completely healed, he flexed his muscles and said, "I need water," before getting up a little grumpily. He laughed to himself, I must look like a real demon now, and tried to wipe the dried up blood off his face with his hands. The blonde saw something on the ground and began to drag his feet, walking with a tired expression on his face now that he had whisker marks on each cheek. He knelt to pick it up, staring at it bewildered. With a sarcastic tone, he said, "TCH, it's just an ID that bastard dropped here," and threw it over his shoulder. Ichiraku wouldn't be open, so I guess I'm heading to my apartment. As he plodded slowly down the dimly lit alleyways toward his apartment, the mustached blonde thought to himself, I don't even know what time it is right now. I'm so gone. Thud, he broke off in the middle of his sentence as a light object fell on his head, causing him to groan. Please don't tell me this is bird shit, for Cammy Sama's sake. He looked up at the sky and prayed in his mind, then ran his hands through his bloodied hair. To come up empty. He turned and saw a notebook on the floor, which caused confusion to appear on his face. He rolled his eyes sarcastically and said, "Now what's this, a notebook of IDs of all my attackers?" The blonde bent over and picked up the light-colored notebook. It appears to be brand new, huh? Who would abandon it at this time? He closed it with a sweat drop and thought, there are no paper bombs in here, it's just completely empty. He turned through its empty pages. He turned the notebook over and muttered to himself, I would have been dead if there were paper bombs attached to this. Guess the beating got to my head. With raised eyebrows and a dry laugh that fell out of his mouth, he asked himself, Death Note huh? As he opened it and turned to the first page. His half-closed eyes, which were closed due to boredom, slightly opened upon noticing a black page adhered to the cardboard side. The page had multiple points written in a small handwriting style with white ink. He arched an eyebrow at the heading, Rules, as the blonde began to read it while continuing to stroll slowly in the direction of his apartment. Here we have the person whose name is written in. He sighed and looked up at the sky. The note shall die. The note will not take effect unless the writer has the person's face in mind when writing her name. Therefore, people sharing the same name will not be affected. He shook his head and asked himself, Come on, really? You expect me to believe this? Is this a game or something? He lowered his head and resumed reading where he had left off. If the reason for demise is indicated within 40 seconds to write the individuals. The blonde muttered to himself, not bad for a prank I guess. It's enough to scare a civilian away, as he turned over the last page and noticed a few more rules written on another black page attached to the notebook's cardboard. If the cause of death is not specified, the person will simply die of a heart attack. After writing the cause of death, details of the death should be written in the next 6 minutes and 40 seconds. He whispered to himself, well, I'll read the rest at home. It's already difficult enough to read this with so little light here, and closed the notebook. After 30 minutes, Naruto's flat the blonde is seen standing next to the little coffee table where the notebook was originally lying after taking a shower to rid himself of all the blood and grime as well as his stained clothes. His azure eyes appeared to be gazing at it with a hint of curiosity. He turned to a wall and turned on his room's lights, sighing to himself as he sat down at the table. Let's see this thing. I don't feel like sleeping right now, he thought to himself and turned the page to read the remaining rules. Alright, let's get started. The user may write with any substance, such as blood or makeup, as long as the letters are readable, distinct, and identifiable from the note. A person's death may be revoked if, within 40 seconds or 6 minutes and 40 seconds after the name or the cause of death has been written, the page on which it appears is either entirely destroyed or the writing instrument is entirely removed from the page. The initial death note functions within a 1.6-mile radius circle around the note, so the individual whose name has been written must be inside that circle. If the individual is outside of the functional area, they will not be impacted. The blonde adolescent put the notebook down calmly and inhaled deeply. The death note will be useless in case of any living being if they don't have a name. Alright, maintain your composure. This is absurd. There's no way this could be true. Even in the world of shinobi, he knew that such a thing was impossible, so he chided himself mentally. This had nothing to do with any shinobi technique. Neither chakra nor the need for the user to make any hand signs was mentioned. He was staring out the window when he heard some voices coming from down the street. He thought to himself, idly, must be the locals, this is red light district after all, and decided what to do with the note. He rose from his seat, and a few minutes later returned with a thin brush and an inkpot ready to write. He muttered, I don't know why I'm doing this, but let's finish this so I can sleep peacefully. No way this sucker is real, and turned to turn the first page. He wrote after dripping the brush into the pot. Rolling his eyes at the impossibility, he said to himself, okay, let's see. I'm gonna test this on myself. Of course, not that I will die of a heart attack within 40 seconds or anything. Then, he wrote his full name as clearly as he could on it. It's done. na.ru.tou.zoo.ma.ki. While writing, the blonde mentally chanted. He then turned to face the little alarm clock next to his bed and started mentally counting the seconds with each tick. 1, 2, 3, 28, 29, he thought, his heart rate starting to increase with his growing anxiety. A big part of him was saying, nope, nothing is going to occur. But every second that went by, a bothersome little voice in his head grew louder. What if you really die? Are you prepared to accept the chance? Drops of perspiration trickled down his face while he kept his eyes on the clock, the blonde swallowing nervously. 33. 32. With an anxious look on his face, Naruto slammed his hands on the table and stood up suddenly, causing the chair to fall back. Fuck! I don't want to die. He cried out. He snatched up the page and tore it quickly before racing at breakneck speed toward the kitchen sink. He muttered, damn it, and frantically opened the tap before holding the page under the water's stream. The ink, still wet, dissolved with the water, wiping out his name. Leaning back, he saw the seconds needle on his alarm clock. 41. He sighed in relief as he placed his hands on the slab and inhaled deeply to regain composure. The blonde with whiskers looked at the now wet page that had no traces of ink on it and thought, even if this thing fails, I still can't risk it. He wiped a small amount of perspiration from his brow and thought, if this death note works, then I just got saved because I erased the medium from the note in the span of 40 seconds after writing my name. As he walked toward the table, Naruto muttered, I need to test this on someone else, and then he heard a female scream coming from the area across the street where he had heard voices a minute earlier. With narrowed eyes, he hurried over to the window. His blood shot to the surface when he saw the bald man pushing himself on a woman who was screaming for help. Even if someone were awakened by her cries for assistance, he knew that since this was the red light district, they would not be able to assist her. The male's face was visible beneath the street lamp pole, and Naruto's eyes widened slightly. His eyebrows shot up in surprise as the blonde turned around and ran towards a small storeroom in his bedroom. I think I've seen that face somewhere, he thought to himself. He swiftly opened it and removed a bundle of newspapers, all of which bore the title, Konoha Daily. He let go of the bundle and started to frantically go through them. He furrowed his brows and looked at the front page of each newspaper, thinking, I remember seeing it on the front page, when the blonde stopped abruptly on one. His eyes narrowed as he looked at the picture and read the headlines. Hosa Takahashi is the one. He's an ex-Junin wanted for multiple crimes, including rape, theft, and murder. Raising to his feet while holding the newspaper, the blonde hurried back to his living room to take a position in front of his coffee table. Naruto whispered, there's no better time than now to check this out, as he swiftly wrote the man's name while continuing to focus on his picture. He ducked to the window and squinted as the baldy repeatedly slapped the woman for not cooperating with him. However, based on her clothing, the woman appeared to be a prostitute. He looked from his screen to his clock. I'll have to go down there if this doesn't work. Crusting his fists at the sight down there, Naruto thought, I can't just stand by and let that bastard have his way. 10 seconds left. 5. 4. He said as he climbed the window, prepared to get inside after proving the book incorrect. He said, 2. 1, with a serious expression on his face before leaping down and removing a kunai he had just taken from his living room. I recognized it as a fake. The bald ex-Junin had stopped, as if frozen by something, he realized mentally as he reared his arm back, ready to throw the weapon while in midair. Argur. Naruto trailed, seeing the man's pained expression and his apparent heavy breathing. What the? He exclaimed. The woman, who was lying on the ground, had multiple bruises on her red cheeks and was staring at the man fearfully. When the man fell face first onto the ground, she saw her opportunity and stood up, her knees quivering, mouth hanging open as she sprinted the other way. On the other hand, Naruto stood motionless on the balcony beneath his apartment, which is on the top floor, and fixed his wide eyes on the bald man. He stammered, Don't tell me, as the kunai fell to the concrete and his grip loosened. He shook off his trance, like state, and leapt over the balcony railing to land next to the man. He hesitantly moved in the direction of the body, bending to check his pulse with his middle and index fingers on his neck. His pupil vibrated in shock and horror as Naruto fell back on his butt. He's dead, he thought to himself, his mind reeling into a state of shock and unbelief. With his eyes closed, the blonde inhaled deeply to calm herself while he bit his thumb so hard it was bleeding. Naruto, get a hold of yourself. Let's calm down and consider this, he said to himself in his head as the blonde got to his feet gradually. He turned around, jumped back out onto the balcony to retrieve his kunai, and went through the window into his apartment. With a pale face, he said to himself, I can't believe it, I could have killed myself a few minutes ago, before settling down cross-legged on his couch. The bearded blonde sighed to himself, thinking, so the death note is real. There's no way the death of that person down there could be a coincidence. His words were mumbled, I should sleep, I have to attend the academy tomorrow too, as he stood up to go to his bedroom. A few minutes later Naruto abruptly sat up from his sleeping position on the bed and exclaimed in frustration, running a hand through his blonde hair, it's no use, I don't think I can sleep. Not when I'm this anxious. The blonde got off the bed and stared at the unfolded bundle of newspapers he had made earlier. He grabbed the bundle of the most recent newspapers and moved toward the object that had violently awakened him from sleep. Now that the blonde was sitting in front of the death note that was on his coffee table, he thought, let's read all those rules again. When he opened the final page, he saw that it was numbered 260. In fact, every page in the notebook had a number, just like any other. Well, after the cause of death has been written, details about the death should be written within the next 6 minutes and 40 seconds, right? Naruto leaned back and put his hands behind his head, staring at the ceiling. He seemed to be lost in thought as he gazed at it for a few minutes. I wonder how far can I go with these details, death details like jumping from the Hokage monument, stabbing yourself in the heart with a kunai in a weapons shop are quite easy and straightforward. However, I do wonder if a person locked in a jail can kill himself with a kunai, when apparently there is none present there. And this circular area of 1.6-mile radius is interesting too, almost covers the entirety of Konoha. This one raises several possibilities too. I guess these rules do not explain all the powers of the death note, Naruto thought to himself as he rubbed the whisker his right cheek with his index finger. The only way to find out, he said, glancing at the newspapers, which were a regular source of information about nearly all of Konoha's criminals, either at large or previously arrested and sent to Konoha's prison, officially known as Konoha's Special Ninja Felony Prison. Should I use the note of death now? He looked at himself gravely and asked. Images of him being viciously beaten suddenly flashed through his mind. He had been beaten ever since he could walk. Naruto clenched his fists, furrowing his brow in frustration. Why not? It's not just about my pain. The women who are being sexually assaulted and the others who are being killed, along with their families and relatives, must also receive justice. Additionally, He stared at the death note with cold, electric blue eyes, exclaiming, and I will become their justice. Squeezing his grip on the brush, he thought, not only theirs, but I need my justice too for all the shit I went through. But I have to use this thing very carefully. I don't want to kill ninja or innocent civilians. But I wouldn't spare those who used me as their scapegoat when it came to my justice. I won't be bothered by glares and insults anymore. I'll leave those who, at the very least, didn't try to kill me. However, those cretins will now suffer my wrath. If they refer to me as a demon, I'll turn into one for them. Naruto now had a sour expression on his face as he started reading the newspapers. He thought idly, a tiny smile on his face, let's see these conditions and this distance limit of death note. A few hours later, 7 a.m. in Naruto's apartment. After getting up and letting out a tired yawn, Naruto muttered, I think all these deaths will prove my theories, before starting to stretch his numb muscles. The sun was peeking through the window, casting a faint glow over the room. Closing the death note, he moved to the window where the blonde now looked out at the early morning crowd swarming the red light district's streets. The brunette had spent the most of the night planning the precise circumstances of his death and going over various scenarios that would allay his uncertainties about certain rules. I would have to wait until tomorrow morning to learn of their deaths through the newspaper because they would happen today. I guess the newspaper isn't much use today, Naruto mused as he turned to head back to his bedroom. He rubbed his eyes and gave himself a silent, no academy today then, before letting out another yawn. Time skip. Naruto's apartment. 9 p.m. Naruto had gone to bed after rising at 4, taking a shower, and eating ramen at the Ichiraku's. After several hours of staring at the ceiling, he suddenly remembered finding that man's ID in the alley yesterday. Fortunately for him, he found it lying exactly where he had thrown it the day before. Thus, we find the blonde sitting on his bed, holding the ID in his hand, and the death note, inkpot, and brush resting on his lap next to the small desk that stands next to his bed. He was staring at the work ID with a deep frown on his face at the moment. This card looks old and a little torn up, and the photo is blurry. He read the other details, the name, address, and other things. I don't know if the death note will work in this case. I don't remember that man's face clearly considering we were in the dark back then. Rubbing the whisker marks on his right cheek, Naruto murmured to himself, Hitsugaki Akabashi. So this bastard is a construction worker, huh? The blonde filled in the first 4 pages of the death note the night before, nodding to himself as he wrote his name on page 6. He sighed and awaited the newspaper of the following day. Now I'll just go and check this address tomorrow morning to see if something happened to this guy or not. Time skip. Naruto's apartment, 8 a.m. the following morning. With an obvious expression of frustration and anxiety in his eyes, Naruto scowled and walked back and forth in front of his entrance door. Come on. Why did the asshole had to be late today of all days? He exclaimed. The newspaper slipped in through the bottom of the door, and he abruptly stopped moving. That yell behind the door, not that you can read or do anything with this you demon, was simply disregarded by the blonde, who was probably berating the delivery guy. He grabbed the newspaper and made a hasty retreat to his bedroom. With the newspaper in front of him, he sat down on the bed, cross-legged, and took a deep breath. Okay. He didn't find the headlines particularly shocking when he glanced at the front page cover. Konoha's criminals are striked by a mini-epidemic, chained heart. With multiple photos of the dead bodies and an article taking up the entire front page, it was evidently the day's top story. A few minutes later Naruto focused as he mentally noted his conclusions after reading the entire article, the causes of deaths, the estimated times of deaths as reported by other witnesses who were present near the victims, and other details that somehow reporters had extracted despite the deaths being covered by Konoha's military police, which was now run by the normal clanless shinobi, Junins and Chunins, after the Uchiha clan was wiped out several years ago. Only people who passed away from heart attacks are mentioned here. It is physically impossible for the victim, who was in jail, to have stabbed himself in the heart with a kunai because weapons are not permitted there. Furthermore, the article claims that he had no physical wounds and died from a heart attack. Another prisoner died from a heart attack because it was impossible for him to jump off the Hokage tower in 5 seconds as planned. This means that the victim will automatically die from a heart attack in 40 seconds if the condition for death is not met by them. And it was approximately 5 hours after I had written his name in the death note that this victim in this jail passed away at 11 a.m. according to the guards. He appeared to be acting normally during that 5-hour period. Therefore, even if I do not record the specifics of death, I can still control the victim's time of death. Additionally, the victim will act normally in the interim between when I write their name and when they pass away. He grinned and thought, well, this should come in extremely useful. Then he turned to another photo to continue thinking about it. And despite the fact that I had torn a page from the death note and written on it separately, this victim also passed away from a heart attack. This indicates a page, or even a small portion of a page from the death note will retain all of the note's abilities. Naruto grinned and muttered to himself, things just got interesting. There's one more thing I need to investigate. Did the death note have any effect on that Akabashi guy the night before? But I suppose school comes first. Time skip. Ninja Academy in Konoha, 12 p.m. Iruka Amino shouted, "Okay class, it's break time." Mizuki was standing next to her. As the class cheered and Iruka and Mizuki started to leave the classroom, so did the other students. Sitting alone on a bench, Naruto thought idly, his glares are annoying, as he noticed Mizuki staring at him with hate in his eyes. There was silence now, so he continued to ponder, I think he should be the only ninja in the whole Konoha's military force who shows such dislike towards me so openly. Naruto turned to face the person standing next to him and asked, Yo Naruto, up for a game of shogi? He blinked and then smiled silly. Now, back to my poker face. The blonde shouted, Sure, Shika, and the Nara nodded as he set the board down on the desk. Well, I suppose lying is in my blood. The blonde kept his smile on the outside as Shikamaru began to arrange the pieces, thinking, but acting like my goofy self may help me in the future. The young Nara moved a piece and said, Okay, let's start, while Naruto grinned to himself. He yelled, "Ooh, I'm so gonna beat you again today," before advancing his piece. Oh, how I adore shogi, thought the blonde, a few minutes later. With a dejected sigh, Shikamaru said, "Damn, I still can't fathom the fact that you beat me every time, Naruto." The game had ended in a matter of minutes. The blonde seemed to be getting better every day. Shikamaru nodded, smirking at the blonde's antics, as Naruto spoke with an ecstatic smile. He told ya. But as usual, you won't tell this to anyone as promised. Naruto, I can't wait to see the real you when the time comes. I really hope you get through this so you can prove to everyone what a talent you really are. When the students started to return to their classes, Shikamaru smirked and thought, well, not that I'm currently showing my potential to anyone too. Time skip. 3 p.m. The academy's exterior with a broad smile on his face, Naruto was currently leaving the academy with other students while placing his hands in his pockets. He ran his fingers over the man's ID card in his pocket and thought, now let's go to his house. The house of Akabashi. A few minutes later the door is locked, huh? Naruto was currently standing in front of Akabashi's house beneath the henge of a regular construction worker. He could be at work right now. His shinobi prowess was actually not as bad as everyone believed. I should ask the neighbors if he went to work. If so, the death note was ineffective. But if it worked, they had to know what happened to him. He reasoned to himself as he turned to head towards the neighboring house on the left. After ringing the bell, a middle-aged woman emerged from behind the door a short while later. He grinned beneath the henge of a middle-aged civilian worker and then made a courteous bow. Hi ma'am, I work with Akabashi.kun. He didn't show up for work today, so I came here to see how he was doing. I saw that the house was locked, so I wondered if you knew where he was, he said, her eyes lowering slightly as she had a distressed look. Naruto's eyes widened slightly as she said, I'm really sorry, but he had a heart attack the previous night. Her tone was sorrowful. He concluded, so. The death note did kill him even when his face was blurry in my mind, although he appeared shocked to the woman outside. I have to behave in a way that a coworker would. The woman's eyes saddened and the company worker trailed in shock, taking a step back in horror and saying, What? But how could this happen? I mean. Yeah, it happened so suddenly. He's a kind person and perfectly healthy, she murmured, her eyes fixed on the ground. Please be kind to my ass, hold on, is, contrary to his true feelings, the coworker asked with a tinge of hope in his voice, hey, what do you mean, he's alive? Please, just die. But as the woman raised her head to blink at him in perplexity, her eyes widened as though she had suddenly realized something. Oh no, she cried, frantically waving her hands to lighten the coworker's mood. Then he's really dead, huh? He asked, his voice sad. Indeed. The kind jerk is no more. But Happy thought to herself while the woman shook her head angrily at his question once more. She spoke with an awkward smile, seemingly trying to cheer him up while he stood frozen in shock. What I mean to say is that I never meant to imply that he's dead. It's just that he was admitted into the hospital last night and now his condition is stable. See? You don't have to be so down about it. The medics say that he will be healthy in no time. What? Does this imply that the death note wasn't successful? Actually, it did give him a heart attack, but not a fatal one. The hazy face must be the reason. Still, this woman seems like a klutz to me, so I'll have to personally check this out, he thought, then put on an outwardly relieved expression. Thank you, Cammy, you really scared me there, he said, sighing as she gave him an apologetic smile. He bowed and said, all right, I'll go check up on him, arigato. He nodded to her, and she said, I was glad to help. I really hope he gets better soon. A short while later, in front of the general hospital in Konoha. At the moment, Naruto, hanged, is seen in front of the hospital, which appears to be a busy place with people coming and going. I guess I couldn't slink in there. I've been here a number of times, so I'm aware of the tight security. And they would all be at my throats the moment I took one step inside. The medics could see through the transformation, though. His eyes smirked as he noticed two nurses conversing. I might be able to get in there, but no point in taking the risk when I have Death Note, he thought to himself. His deep blue eyes narrowed the instant he saw one of them. He glared at her, bitterly thinking, I remember her, she's the one who stabbed me last year when I was here because of my injuries after getting beaten by a mob of crazy assholes. Slowly a smirk appeared on his face. The company worker approached them both, his expression neutral as he pretended to be lost in thought. He could now read her name, in close enough detail, from a patch of her uniform worn on her right breast. With a mental smirk, Naruto left the area and leapt through the rooftops in the direction of his apartment, where the Death Note was kept hidden for the time being. I'll have to make sure I carry some pages from the note with me at all times from now on. After 15 minutes, in front of the General Hospital in Konoha. Once more, Naruto appeared, disguised as an unidentified civilian, a short distance from the two nurses who continued to converse intensively. It appeared that the hospital staff was currently having lunch. Naruto stared at the young nurse and his wristwatch, which Sandaime had given him for his birthday recently, thinking, okay, only 30 seconds before it's 3:43. 3. 2. Just 1. She abruptly stopped speaking as Naruto grinned slyly and entered the henge. Mitsuru. Chan? Is something wrong? Death Note truly is on time, he mused, grinning, as Mitsuru, the nurse, ignored her friend's calls and began to make her way to the hospital's entrance. Upon observing her entry into the hospital, he began to slowly stroll around the building and into the hospital's backyard. The blonde was standing behind the big building when he whispered, "Here we are, still beneath the henge." Right now, he was looking up, at one window out of dozens of windows in every room. Naruto turned to face the large tree in the middle of the grassy yard, but as soon as he saw that nobody else was there, he started to run towards it. He climbed up and settled himself on a thick branch in front of the window, leaning his back against the trunk, still unable to shake the transformation. He let out a long, heavy sigh and leaned his head back, closing his eyes. His lips curled slightly upward as he opened his eyes, looked at his watch, and then fixed a serious expression on his face while staring out the window. Woosh! Naruto caught a file that was still sitting there, flying through the open window at incredible speeds. He looked at the file cover idly, thinking to himself, it's a good thing knowing the complete layout of the hospital considering I've arrived here so many times in the past. The medical report of Akabashi Hitsugaki. Naruto got up, straightened his clothes, and peered through the window where the file had zipped out. He looked at Mitsuru's still body on the floor and grinned, "Sayonara, Mitsuru. Chan," before he stumbled clumsily toward his apartment. Naruto caught a file that was still sitting there, flying through the open window at incredible speeds. He looked at the file cover idly, thinking to himself, it's a good thing knowing the complete layout of the hospital considering I've arrived here so many times in the past. The medical report of Akabashi Hitsugaki. Naruto got up, straightened his clothes, and peered through the window where the file had zipped out. He looked at Mitsuru's still body on the floor and grinned, "Sayonara, Mitsuru. Chan," before he stumbled clumsily toward his apartment. Naruto grinned and thought, so it all went according to the plan, as he leapt through the roofs at astonishingly fast speeds for a boy his age. However, it wasn't wholly unexpected given his propensity for dodging Enbu or Junins through the use of cunning, thought-out plans, or just plain old speed and stamina. He was still changing, and he was still blurring toward his apartment while concealing the file inside his orange jacket that had been zipped. Inanely, he started to recall what he had penned in that nurse Mitsuru's death note. At 3:43 p.m. sharp, she will enter the Konoha General Hospital and would ask for Akabashi Hitsugaki's room number at the reception under the excuse that she needs to check up on his condition. Walking at a normal pace, she will enter Akabashi Hitsugaki's room and will grab his medical file. At exactly 3:50 p.m., she will enter room number 26 with the medical file and throw it through the open window as hard as she can. At precisely 3:51 p.m., she will die of a heart attack. Now, based on my experiments from earlier today, there were a few things I needed to take into account. Although I was unaware of Akabashi's room number, the nurse under the note of death most likely did. The victims of the death note are unable to perform tasks that are impossible for them, such as going to a room whose location you are unsure of, so in the unlikely event that she didn't, I had to reassure her of this by forcing her to ask for his room at the reception. If she hadn't, she would have died of a heart attack there and then. As I wasn't sure how the death note would affect her movement, I had her walk normally now. This helped to ensure that she wouldn't act strangely or look suspicious to any of the medics or shinobi who were currently on the scene. Since nurses are typically familiar with the location of medical files, She arrived at room number 26 precisely at 3:50 after retrieving the file. She had 7 minutes in total, which is a comfortable amount of time, to complete those tasks between 3:43 and 3:50. Therefore, I assume that if she hadn't made it to room 26 by precisely 3:50, she would have again automatically passed away from a heart attack. Throwing the file through the window was a fairly simple task after that, and a minute later, at precisely 3:51, I died. Yes, everything went as expected. Still, there were still a number of ways the plan could have gone wrong. Upon further reflection, there is one primary question that comes to mind. How did she act while the death note was in her system? Did she behave as she usually would have? Or did she behave like a subdued zombie? He smirked as the cool breeze soothed his form. There are still a lot of questions about the death note, but it's not like I don't have enough experimental candidates, he thought. A few minutes later, Naruto's apartment in Konoha. Naruto grinned and said, "Ah, it feels great, once in my life, everything looks so achievable. Once in my life, I do not find myself cursed. This thing." As he lay on his bed and looked up at the death note he was holding in his right hand. He closed his eyes for a moment and sighed. "Is a gift to me. Death note is the first usable gift in my life. No offense to Gigi, though. The wristwatch came in pretty handy today. And I'm sure that it will be of great use in the future," he said. "I feel a little bad about killing that nurse and all those people today, but they deserved it. I will not stand by and watch them do as they please. In addition, I'm killing the criminals here, and what could be a worse crime than attempting to murder an orphan boy in the most graphic manner imaginable since his birth? What the heck, Gigi? I'm not going to forgive them and turn into this village's scapegoat." The blonde balled his fists in frustration as his thoughts grew darker. The whiskered blonde clenched the death note tighter and he sat up, taking deep breaths to calm himself. "Now, let's all settle in. What should I do next, then? I can only use the newspaper to so much extent. It will only provide a daily source of minor and local criminal activity. But what about the really dangerous ones, the most vicious of high-ranking criminals imprisoned in Konoha's special ninja felony prison's darkest corners? I have heard that there are some very violent ones down in the torture and interrogation department, so even those people cannot be disregarded." So, his mind wandered as the blonde reclined on his bed once more, the sun lowering as he fixed his blank gaze on the ceiling. He thought grimly, so, the only one who has all this highly classified information would be Gigi himself, or I should say the Hokage. Although obtaining such information would typically be difficult, Naruto knew that things weren't impossible because of the death note. "I know he keeps those files somewhere in his office, at least. Anything classified would obviously be under high security or hidden using only sealing when he's not in his office. All I know how to do is make a storage scroll. Thus, the only time I get a chance is when Gigi is working in his office. At that moment, the majority of the items on his table are typically outside. He refers to them as the cursed paperwork." He considered this further before reaching for the medical file and opening it. Name: Hitsugaki Akabashi, male, sexual orientation. 36 years old, B+ blood group present, non-military. Employment: construction laborer. Details: on October 21st, experienced a cardiac arrest due to an acute myocardial infarction. As of right now, stable symptoms include palpitations, sweating, and chest pain. The blonde closed the file, realizing that he was reading more than he could possibly comprehend. All right, so briefly, he thought, even if the death note didn't kill him, it sure as hell screwed him up, and then he looked at the passport-sized picture of Akabashi in the upper right corner of the first sheet. Naruto read the death note and grinned darkly. "Oh well, time to put the guy out of his misery and to be reunited with his family," he muttered. With the image of Akabashi firmly etched in his mind, he reached for the brush on the dresser next to his bed and wrote his name. "Now with that bastard out of the picture, I have to plan on how to get access to the criminal files. More importantly, I can't steal them. So I have to write their names right there in Gigi's office somehow. I'll need to prepare for this," with a serious look on his face. Time. Skip. Hokage's office, 11 a.m., 2 days later. At the moment, paperwork is the suffocating evil of all dimensions and creations that the Sandaime Hokage is drowning in. Sighing, with dark circles under his eyes, Sarutobi said, "This is the time where I really miss you, Minato," taking a puff from his pipe. On the other hand, The old fire shadow was definitely relieved to see the warm sunbeams coming through the large windows behind him. He looked away from the papers and started thinking about what had happened recently that had caught his interest. It truly seems odd that so many criminals passed away from heart attacks at roughly the same time just a few days ago. Additionally, a few more criminals lost their lives to heart attacks yesterday as well, albeit less than the previous time. All of this, a coincidence? Hiruzen thought as he vacantly stared at his desk. Wham! As he was thinking, a loud, enthusiastic voice snapped him out of his reverie and made him look up at the animated blonde figure. Ohayo Gigi. With a warm smile, he said, "You should knock before coming in Naruto-kun," as the bearded blonde kept grinning. The old Sarutobi sighed as Naruto blurted through his words, "Oh come on Gramps. Stop being so stuck up. Chill out a bit will ya? And what are you doing right now?" He was a big fan of Naruto and treated him like a grandpa. The blonde, who never let things get dull, frequently broke into his office to give him the much needed respite from all the paper crap. He continued, "Paperwork, you know, I was just arranging these criminal files. Being a Hokage isn't all about being strong only, you know." As Naruto's breathing caught in surprise, though there were no visible signs of it. He nodded enthusiastically to the old cage, and the blonde thought to herself, smirking slightly inside, "Oh the luck Kami Sama showers me with." The blonde pouted and the Sandame said, "So Naruto-kun, I see you have again bunked the academy, huh? What devious pranks are you pulling this time?" With a hint of amusement in his voice. "I'm hurt Gigi. Why would you think I would do such things? I didn't go to academy today at all. Just didn't feel like it," he said with a grin. Naruto had a deep affection for the Hokage, and he knew that despite his inability to stop his early years from becoming gloomy, the old man had done everything in his power. Naruto came to the conclusion that people would always find a way to torture him, regardless of how many laws were passed or how many guards Hiruzen assigned to ensure his safety. It was up to the populace to put the laws into effect. A Hokage's approval was not required for their creation. With raised eyebrows that caused the blonde to sigh, he said, "I see then, you're quite innocent. Then what is it this time? You want to go to Ichiraku's? You have a one-track mind, Gigi. All you think about is ramen," Naruto blurted out, appearing irritated, as he heard Hiruzen's pipe fall to the ground. With a look as wide-eyed as a fish, Sarutobi looked at Naruto in disbelief, his eyebrows quivering as the blonde felt herself on the verge of laughing until he cleared his throat. He rambled excitedly as he showed the Hokage his wristwatch, a bright smile appearing on his face as he briefly looked at the time. "Oh, I also wanted to say thank you for the wristwatch you gave me on my birthday, forgot to say earlier you know," he blurted. Probably another 10 or so seconds, the bearded blonde thought to himself as, outside, he was smiling foolishly and the Sandame was just laughing at his grandson. Like figures antics. He answered, "No need to say that Naruto-kun, you deserve much more than that," though there was clearly sadness in his eyes. "Say, I wanted to talk to you about something important Gigi, you see." The middle-aged woman entered through the already open door, interrupting the blonde, "Sorry for interrupting Hokage Sama, but Mitokado Sama and Utatane Sama are requesting your presence in the meeting chamber immediately. They say that it is an urgent matter." With a sigh, Hiruzen got up sluggishly and let out a yawn. With an apparent frown on his face, Naruto's secretary Akio bowed before leaving the room. "I'll be on my way then. You can resume your duties Akio-san," he said. It should be easy from now on, he thought, smirking to himself. He said, "I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, but we can talk later nay? I've got an urgent matter to attend to the 12-year-old's disapproving look." He said urgently, but he was secretly impressed with his own acting abilities at recognizing the conflicted expression in Sarutobi's eyes. "But I wanted to talk to you. There's this really important matter I want to discuss with you, and it has to be today. It's really urgent Gigi." The elderly Kage gave Naruto a pitying smile and gave him a loving hair rub before continuing. Naruto nodded in agreement with a sigh as the Sandame got up to leave the office. "I assure you that I would return as soon as possible. In the meantime, you can wait here for me, okay? If anyone asks why you are here, just say I ordered you to come here." "Excellent." The blonde thought seriously as he walked calmly to sit on the couch. "Now I have to do this as fast as I can. He shouldn't be back for about an hour." He looked at his watch and thought, "I also don't sense any Anbu here, means they are already following Gigi, Must be his bodyguards. The blonde sat there, his elbows resting on his thighs and his right index and middle fingers rubbing the whisker marks on his cheek in his typical thinking position. About 5 minutes more, he murmured to himself. He was looking straight ahead at the wall across from Hiruzen now, a totally different look than when he was standing in front of Hiruzen just moments before. There was a click, and he was lost in thought, not understanding how 5 minutes had passed so quickly. Grinning, Naruto got up and strode calmly over to the Hokage's desk. Well done, Akio-san. He moved to stand next to Hiruzen's chair and started to glance through the large file. This appears to be some seriously prohibited material. It essentially consists of records of extremely dangerous criminals apprehended by the military police of Konoha during the preceding 6 years. The fucking thing? They still haven't received a death sentence? Is the decision still pending after 6 years? In any case, what on earth has Gigi been up to? He is far too forgiving. Just take a look at this criminal, Mobashi Amuro, who killed his wife because she loved her child and refused to have an abortion because he wanted to get rid of his own child for reasons that are unclear. He and other vile assholes have no right to life, not even in prison. The lowest of the low, the bastards, are responsible for rapes, gang rapes, murders, slavery, and killing for pleasure. A low growl came out of Naruto's lips as he clenched his left fist tightly, anger coursing through his body. His eyes narrowed, he gazed at the pictures of these criminals with a cold, oceanic blue hatred in them. He recognized some of their faces as the ones who had previously beaten him. And they refer to me as a devil? All these guys deserve is an abrupt decision to die. The blonde calmed down and turned to the first page of the folder, thinking to himself, I seriously doubt Gigi's doing his work properly here. Every page that was stapled or attached included personal information about the offender, multiple photos of him taken from various perspectives, and other official and administrative materials that the blonde was unable to get used to. It's time to work. I have a lot of names to write down. He thought to himself, I have to make the most of this right now since I won't be able to access these files anytime I want, and removed a small white storage scroll from the inside pocket of his jacket. The table was piled high with files and folders when he laid it on the chair and opened it, placing his hand on the scroll's circular seal. Chakra. Channeling through his hand, he whispered. Kai. Release, and a puff of smoke appeared, revealing several pages, precisely torn from the Death Note, stacked neatly on top of one another. He selected the top one and looked at the paper. It was divided into 3 columns. Naruto had already filled the last 2, leaving the first blank. Heart attack was written in each row of the second column, indicating that this column was identifying the cause of death. Nonetheless, the time of death was indicated in the third column. In this, the same date was displayed in 3 consecutive rows, each with an hourly time difference. The date for the next day, with the same times of death, would then be found in the next set of 3 consecutive rows, third column only, and so on until the final row. The third column row 1, October 25th, 2 p.m. Row 2, October 25th, 3 p.m. Row 3, October 25th at 4 p.m. Row 4, October 26th at 2 p.m. Row 5, October 26th, 3 p.m. Row 6, October 26th at 4 p.m., and so forth to the page's final row. Flipping the page over revealed the same format on the reverse side as well. Actually, there were a few more pages with the same format on top of the stack. I'll save time by doing this. I just need to type their names in the first column at this point. As a result, these bastards will start to die from heart attacks on October 25th. 3 will die in a single day, at 2 p.m., 3 p.m., and 4 p.m. Naruto smirked and looked at the inkpot and brush Hiruzen was using. This will throw off any possible investigators, they wouldn't know where to start at least, he thought. The blonde, remembering the writing my own name on the Death Note stunt he had pulled a few days earlier, muttered to himself, well, this ink is of high quality, and definitely a water. Proof 1. So I have to do this carefully. He said to himself, okie dokie, let's do this, before setting the Death Note page down and beginning to write the names, in the first column, while glancing at the associated criminals' pictures. Observe that he is only writing one name in a row. About an hour later, directly outside the office of the Hokage, Hiruzen yawned and rubbed his eyes as he ascended the stairs and moaned about his foolish old teammates, calling him for talking about insignificant civilian issues. All right, not entirely, It was okay because they wanted to talk about these odd heart attacks. However, they soon began droning on about unrelated topics that we had previously discussed. It seemed as though they had simply stopped by to have a conversation. He laughed, thinking, I guess those idiots really miss the old times. When he arrived at his office, the door was already ajar, and he grinned. Ramen was the only word that made sense as Naruto dozed off on the couch, snoring loudly and mumbling unintelligible words. Shutting the door, he walked over to his desk and sat down, letting out a sigh. This job really wears me out sometimes, he thought to himself before opening his eyes. He instantly narrowed his eyes as he looked at the paperwork he had previously left. Someone had a hand on these. Now completely aware, he scanned the room with a hint of alarm. These pages could not have moved on their own because the fan was off and the windows were closed. I know precisely how I left them, and this folder and other papers have undoubtedly been touched by someone. Naruto would never even touch something like this. Did someone break in while he was asleep? After all, when I arrived here, the door was already open. And Akio-san too wouldn't touch this. I have already told her not to before. Hiruzen opened the folder somewhat frantically, thinking with growing suspicion. His eyes twitched as he turned the pages he was currently looking at, only for a tick mark to appear on his forehead. Naruto. He snarled softly, then shut the folder forcefully and slammed it against the table, causing the blonde to startle out of sleep. He mumbled, huh? What? With drowsy eyes as Hiruzen approached and stood in front of him, holding the heavy folder. With a scrutinizing glare, he grunted and threw the heavy folder onto the blonde's lap, saying, explain, simply. He looked incredulous at Sarutobi as he opened the folder, and then a sheepish grin appeared on his face as his mouth opened in a "oh" of realization. The images of the criminals were edited on the first few pages. Edited in that some of them now had eye patches, some had beards, some had piercings in their ears, some had ramen written on their foreheads, and some even had black circles under their eyes, giving them the appearance of insomniacs. Ultimately, Hiruzen learned today that Naruto was quite cunning when he used a brush dripping with ink. Well, I was bored, the blonde said, grinning nervously as Hiruzen's eyes began to twitch once more. The professor nearly yelled, bored? Bored you say? If you get bored, you don't paint the faces of high-ranking criminals of a village Naruto. As the blonde leapt out of the couch in a funny way. He pointed an accusing finger at the sandame, making him sweat at the cigar comment. It's your fault in the first place. You said you would return as soon as possible. What was I supposed to do? Become the Hokage and smoke a cigar? He yelled back. He said, sounding serious, still Naruto, do you know how important this stuff is? Normally, I would have heavily punished the one who did this. As a tiny smile appeared on the elderly Kage's face and Naruto's expression clearly faded. He now spoke in a grandfatherly tone as the blonde nodded with a somewhat dejected expression. But since this is you, I'll let it slide this time. Pranks are good once in a while, Naruto, but do remember some of your pranks may cause serious trouble someday, he said. Naruto sighed, making the Hokage sweat once more. Yeah, I'm sorry, Gigi. I thought they would look cool like that, he said. Like hell, they looked cool. They appeared even more vicious and menacing than they had previously. The blonde thought, I have to leave now, time's running out, and he suddenly smiled outside. His exclamation, "Nay Gigi, I suddenly remembered something. I gotta go right now, bye and see you later," caused Hiruzen to chuckle at the animated blonde as he hurried out the open door. When he heard Naruto's scream reverberate through the hallway, he thought, he really is one of a kind. In an instant, he zipped to appear in front of the mentioned drawer on the desk, causing Hiruzen's eyes to widen in horror. And check your Icha. Icha crap in the secret compartment of your left bottom. Most drawer. Oh my god. Not a damn thing. Kindly fuck off. Screw it. He pulled out the most valuable book he owned and mentally chanted his shit mantra. Thanks to a phenomenon known as Naruto with an ink brush, Sarutobi nearly had a heart attack. Not the death note, lol, when he looked at the destroyed, graphic illustrations in the book. Not even the blonde had departed from the front cover. Naruto, you little bastard, was yelled throughout Konoha, and at that moment, everyone realized that the prank master had struck once more. In the meantime, the woods directly behind the Hokage's monument. Naruto was currently racing through the foliage as quickly as he could have entered the forests. Excellent, everything went so well, he thought to himself. I didn't know I could fool Gigi so easily. as he leapt at indistinct speeds through the trees. Shinobi are known for their keen observational abilities, and Gigi is no exception. Beneath that grandfatherly face, beneath that warm smile, there's a deadly one. I was aware that the missing papers and signs of tampering would be readily noticed by Gigi, the Hokage and a shinobi of the cage level. Thus, this was a pretty clever use of my idiotic personality. Everyone is aware of my ignorance. Even Gigi feels that my mental strength is somewhat lacking. Because of this, I painted those faces somewhat, giving the impression that the papers were misplaced and that I had only ruined them with ink out of boredom, when in reality I was using the death note to kill those criminals. This is what the knucklehead Naruto would have done in his absence. Feeling the sealing scroll in the inside pocket of his jumpsuit, Naruto smirked and thought, now there's not even the slightest chance of him getting suspicious of me. Add to the fact that doing the same with Icha. Icha was icing on the cake. At least I filled in all 90 entries in the first column, meeting the quota for 30 days. So from tomorrow, October 25th, those bastards will start dying from heart attacks, he thought to himself as he kept running farther into the forest and out of the Hokage's office. I just need to go ahead and cross that 2-mile marker I marked in this forest yesterday. A few minutes later, unknown location in the forests behind the Hokage's monument. Naruto yelled, "Here," as he slid by a big tree with a big cross carved on its trunk. The blonde moved to sit by the designated tree, leaning his back against its trunk, panting a little bit at the moment and dripping sweat down his face. He unzipped his jacket and took out the white scroll that contained the blank pages of the death note that he had stored inside for emergency use when he wasn't at his apartment. Then he produced another scroll, this one blue in color, from inside his jacket. He told himself before opening the scroll that blue represents the scroll containing the death note pages which have already been used. When it was opened, a tiny cloud of smoke cleared, revealing 10 pages of a death note written in Naruto's hand. He fished through them and removed 3 pages in all. Then he started staring at the names that were written on those pages. Naruto grinned, mentally stating, Homura Mitokado, Kaharu Utatane, Akio Imamiya, the names of the 2 guards who stand at the entrance of the Hokage's office building. All of them played their parts perfectly. He was staring at the conditions of their death that he had specified in the pages. Now that I have the death note pages with me and am approximately 2 miles from the Hokage's office building, these guys have left the 1.6-mile radius circular area that these pages represent. He thought seriously as he started to dig up some loose soil with his hand. Therefore, they're beyond the reach of the death note, and even if I had written their names in the death notes page, they wouldn't die now. Naruto wrote the names of the 2 guards, Homura, Kaharu, and Akio in the death's note pages that he currently holds in his hand before visiting the Hokage's tower today. From his experiments yesterday, he had also concluded that people would act normally when under the influence of the death note. For instance, if the death note states that the person should pass away in a year, he would behave normally until that time rather than acting as if he were a robot in control. Additionally, the death note takes effect 40 seconds after the person's name is written on it. According to the terms of the death note, Homura and Kaharu were to leave their houses at precisely 11:05 a.m. in order to arrive at the Hokage's office building. Once there, they were to give Akio, who was also influenced by the note, instructions to ask Saru to meet them in the meeting hall, citing an urgent matter. They would spend about an hour discussing Hiruzen's strange deaths and other civilian matters when the Hokage arrived to meet them. Following that, they would say their goodbyes, head back to their separate houses, and carry on with their regular behavior. Note that this is a rough explanation and does not exactly match what was written in the death note. Akio would carry on with her work and conduct as usual until she received instructions from the 2 elders. Then she would go into the Hokage's office at precisely 11:07 a.m. to let Hiruzen know what was going on. She would lock the door from the outside at precisely 11:13 a.m. In Naruto's estimation, 6 minutes was enough for Hiruzen to leave the office. She would open the door at precisely 11:58 a.m. to give Naruto a heads up to finish the job quickly so he has time to ruin the criminals' faces and Hiruzen's Icha. After that, she would resume her responsibilities and act normally. But the 2 guards' only job was to let Naruto in without letting him do any of their usual shit. Otherwise, they would have refused to let the blonde inside the building, claiming that Hokage-sama is busy. Brat, come back later, and he would always receive that response in response. Thus, if they allowed him in, they would also act normally. The pages of the death note indicated that these 5 individuals died on November 1st, roughly a week after their names were written. However, since Naruto had taken the pages with the victims' names written on them when they were roughly 2 miles away, they were no longer within the 1.6-mile radius of the death note and were safe. And they wouldn't change now even if I took these pages back with me and forced those guys to enter Death Note's range once more. It's fortunate that I conducted additional experiments the day before visiting Gigi's office today. He crumpled the 3 pages and placed them in the small pit he had dug with his hands. Now let's leave these pages here, I have no use for them anymore, he thought to himself. He refilled the pit with loose soil, giving it a pat, then wiped his hands on the dry sand. He sealed the remaining 7 pages back in the blue scroll, which contained the names of the criminals he had just written in Hokage's office. Dusting his clothes, he stood up and pocketed the scrolls that were blue and white. It's a comfort that these criminals are currently housed in Konoha's prison, which is 1.6 miles away from where I am. This means that they are currently within the range of the pages of death notes where their names have been inscribed. He sighed and turned to go, thinking that if he had continued, their deaths would have been cancelled as well, and he would have had to write their names again. Konoha Ninja's felony prison was situated in a remote part of the state outside of Konoha. He thought to himself as he leapt through the forests for several minutes, I wouldn't need to go too near, I'll just bury the Death Note's pages near the large compound so that those criminals are in range at all times and would continue to die over the month. He buried those pages once more after arriving at the prison's vicinity. The show is about to begin, Naruto mused while dabbing perspiration from his brow. After a week, hey, have you heard about all these nasty criminals dying of heart attacks? Well, who hasn't? The whole of Konoha knows about this. They all have been dying since a week now, all of them due to heart attacks. I've heard that the times of their deaths are identical too. 3 criminals die every day in the afternoon. I don't know about the exact timing though. Do you think all these deaths are pure coincidences? I mean, heart attack is a natural cause of death, you know. Hell no. I'd say this is the work of some cool superhero who has decided to kill all those monsters. Talking about monsters, do you think he will kill that boy too? Well, I certainly hope he does. There would one less monster roaming free here. The Konoha Daily newspaper has even named him as Kira. Now that's cool. A hero working in secrecy, doing something that our Hokage hadn't done until now. I'm kinda scared, you know. What if he also decides to kill the innocents? He seems to have this godly power to kill anyone with heart attacks. Oh, don't worry. I have a feeling Kira's a good guy, or a gal. For the whole week, he's been killing only the criminals. I think Kira can only kill 3 people in a single day, and only in the afternoon. Yeah. That must be the limits of his powers. No, you're wrong. Haven't you heard of the local gangs and thugs also being killed by heart attacks every day? The prison isn't the only place where the criminals are dying. I wonder though, what kind of forbidden ninja art he may be using. I have never heard of such a strong technique which can kill your opponent with a heart attack in an instant. These were the whispers and rumors that people were spreading among themselves these days. The word, Kira, was now spoken roughly 1 million times a day in Konoha by everyone from shinobi to adults and children alike. It had spread through the hidden leaf like wildfire. Most of the village's civilian population was content with what had happened over the course of the previous week. Some, though, were not feeling so good and were beginning to worry. Department of Torture and Interrogation, Head Office. In front of a large table covered in files and other documents, Hiruzen and Ibiki Morino, the head of the T&I department, stood in the head office. Ibiki, this has gone too far now. We can't allow this to happen anymore. At first, I had just pushed away these deaths as mere coincidences, but with each passing day, and more deaths on the horizon has utterly crushed that notion, Hiruzen said with a serious expression. Ibiki was a little accusing when she said, I agree, Hokage. Sama. I had already told you that something was suspicious, but you decided to wait, which caused the Sarutobi to sigh and take a puff from his pipe. After all of that, I want to know what or who is responsible for all of these victims, the elderly professor said, gesturing to the papers on the table. He concluded by giving the Tokubetsu Junin a nod. Are dying just because of heart attacks. Some of them were shinobi, and a ninja dying of heart attack. That's something rarely heard of. The door to the office opened and 3 men walked in. Yeah, I agree. Could this be the work of an enemy? However, I can't state anyone who could kill someone with heart attacks. That's something I've never heard of, Ibiki grumbled. The Sandaime Hokage looked at the copy ninja and said, "Oh, I'm surprised you're on time, Kakashi." With a serious expression, the Junin said, "This is something that can't afford any tardiness, Hokage. Sama. I've finished that S-rank mission and just returned an hour ago. I think we can begin the investigation now." "Man, what a drag. Why'd you call me so early? Couldn't we have waited for at least a few more hours?" With a somber expression, Inoichi said, "Shut up, Shikaku. This is a serious matter. Let's start, Hokage." Sama. The Nara, for once in his life, looked serious. "Oh, I'm surprised you're on time, Kakashi, the copy ninja," gazing Sandaime Hokage said with a start. With a serious expression, the Junin said, "This is something that can't afford any tardiness, Hokage. Sama. I've finished that S-rank mission and just returned an hour ago. I think we can begin the investigation now." "Man, what a drag. Why'd you call me so early? Couldn't we have waited for at least a few more hours?" Inoichi, wearing a somber expression, interrupted the Nara, who, amazingly, for once in his life appeared serious. "Shut up, Shikaku. This is a serious matter. Let's start, Hokage." "Sama," Inoichi said. The five of them sat around a big table that was covered in files that Kakashi and Shikaku started looking through. Shikaku spoke, not taking his eyes off the documents, and the Hokage asked with a serious expression, "All right. Let's get on with this. Ibiki here suggests that all these deaths caused by heart attacks could be the work of an enemy. You have any thoughts on this?" He said, "No, there's a 90% chance that this isn't the work of an enemy," which caused Ibiki to look at him bewildered while Kakashi agreed with him. With raised eyebrows, Inoichi asked, "How can you say so? If the enemies of Konoha were not involved, then who would murder so many people? Did they mean someone else? Someone who was inside the walls? Or perhaps the person who got along well with them? It's actually really easy. All these people passing away from heart attacks, which had suddenly become more common after." The Nara trailed, turning back to the file's opening page. 20th October, were either the ones locked in prison, the local thugs, and in some cases, innocent civilians. Tell me, if this was the work of an enemy, wouldn't they rather kill our active shinobi, Konoha's military power, instead of already locked up prisoners, some street criminals and civilians? What would they possibly achieve by that? This Kira, it has to be someone, or a group of some people right here in Konoha with his own unique sense of justice. Ibiki asked him about it. "What do you mean by unique?" the four of them asked, noticing Shikaku's peculiar word choice as he continued to shuffle through the files. He said, averting his gaze from the files to look at each of them as they nodded. "First, let's suppose Kira is one guy here in our investigation. It would not matter if he's a group, a secret organization, or a female. At least not yet." Returning his focus to the documents, he began to speak. "Kira, this guy here until now has killed from the most vicious of criminals locked in Konoha's special ninja felony prison. Some criminals involved in day-to-day petty criminals to some of the innocent civilians. Considering that most probably he's a resident of Konoha, or at least has been for the past week, he started to kill these people since a week ago. Now killing those criminals in prison, and even some local street criminals, can be put under the category of general justice, which anyone would do if they possess the power. But these innocent civilians who have been killed by heart attacks, these deaths must contain his own personal interest. Most probably he's taking some form of revenge. I'm saying that we start this case by investigating the deaths of these innocent civilians. This will definitely lead us to some form of clue." He verbalized, making Sarutobi nod while Ibiki too found the logic in his explanation. "You said that it has to be someone within Konoha. But according to the files, no physical wounds were detected on the victims during the autopsy. Most probably this weeds out the possibility of any normal shinobi. Earlier I also considered the possibility of Kira being a medic, as it's easy to stop one's heart for even a normal medic. However, for a medic to do that, they would have to be present at the site of death to kill them. In Konoha's prison, where most of the deaths have been taking place, the guards haven't reported any suspicious activity at all, and visitors have been banned there in response to these latest killings. This, Kira, he must possess some kind of a technique of godly levels to just kill these victims without being present there at the time of death. I don't think he's using ninja arts. Genjutsu. It's impossible to kill a person through heart attack via genjutsu. Even the strongest genjutsus of Sharingan aren't capable of doing that, nor are any genjutsu experts. The types of combats inflicting physical damage like ninjutsu or kenjutsu, He can't be using them too. Coming to the rare skill that is Fuinjutsu, no traces of any seals were found during the autopsy, and I also can't fathom the fact as to how he could have planted seals on all these victims. The fact that he kills everyday means executing this technique probably is like child's play for him. It may be a bloodline, but truthfully, I'm not sure as to how he's killing all these people. This time, however, it was Kakashi who spoke while the others found themselves either surprised or impressed. Inoichi thought, "Whoa. I've never heard Kakashi say that much in one breath," and Shikaku appeared to be taken aback by the copy ninja's insights. Hiruzen sighed and Ibiki smirked somewhat sadistically at the thought. "Well, right now, it doesn't matter how he kills all these victims. We just have to catch him and let Ibiki ask him how he's doing this. If we get our hands on this technique, the strength of Konoha's military force would skyrocket. We would be hitting two birds with one stone," Hiruzen said. Then, as Shikaku suggested, "We should immediately start investigating the civilians who died via heart attacks since 20th October, Inoichi said. Ibiki grimaced and asked, "So then, whom should we start looking into?" This civilian was the first one to die. Hitsugaki Akabashi had a heart attack on 21st October. He survived it, but immediately the next day again had a heart attack and died in the Konoha's General Hospital, his room number 21. What's interesting about this death is that around the same time, another civilian named Amamiya Mitsuru, who was working there as a nurse, died around the same time, her body found in room number 26. The fact that this Akabashi had a heart attack the previous night, and then another one the next day, is very suspicious, the sluggish Nara murmured as he to the other survivors. Both of the rooms that were mentioned are, if my memory serves me correctly, on the second floor. Shikaku frowned and thought, there has to be some sort of relation between their deaths, since they died around the same time and same location. Shikaku, Hiruzen said to get his focus before going on. He made them nod just as Shikaku was about to suggest the same thing. You, Kakashi and Inoichi head off to the hospital and investigate this further. The staff there can provide you some clues. Ibiki, you come with me to my office, he commanded. Inoichi grinned and made Kakashi sweat, and oh, how about we name this investigative group? What about KISSI? He sighed, thinking, I couldn't have found a more lamer name. Kissy? Hiruzen inquired, perplexed. Inoichi smiled and nodded to himself. Yeah. As in, K, for Kakashi, I, for Inoichi, S, for Shikaku, the other, S, for Sandame or maybe Sarutobi, and finally, I, for Ibiki. Shikaku sighed. Whatever, let's just go. Ninja Academy in Konoha, 1:59 p.m. Sitting in the classroom listening to Iruka's lecture on kunai and shuriken projectiles, Naruto thought to himself, smirking slightly, as he looked at his wristwatch. 3, 2, 1, and the first one of the day rests in peace. I wonder how this would make Gigi, the Hokage, feel. He would definitely try looking into this. However, I genuinely doubt that they will succeed in this. The Death Note is just divine, really. I wonder how they would approach this case, but there's no way they are going to find any clues. He leaned his head on the desk and watched the blonde look out the window. I, for a fact, know that Konoha has some real brainers in its grasp, so it's not completely impossible, he thought to himself. Naruto, he said, limply raising his head. He blinked to see Iruka frowning, the other students appearing to be giggling to themselves. He's gonna get it again. He sure keeps things entertaining here. The blonde with whiskers sighed and scratched his head, letting out a yawn as a tick mark appeared on the Chunin's head as they started to whisper. As Naruto stood up and looked at the question in the diagram, he yelled, stand up and answer the question on the blackboard. A shinobi throws a kunai at an angle of 30 degrees to the horizontal with an initial velocity of 49 meters per second. Assuming that the air current is perfect and that there are no obstacles in the way until the kunai touches the ground, compute the duration of flight. Assume that gravity causes an acceleration of 9.8 meters per second square. Peeved. He chuckled to himself. This is basic stuff. The answer is 5 seconds. He looked away to see that Sakura and almost everyone else were occupied with answering the question on paper. Iruka, wearing a displeased expression, said, well, we don't have all day, Naruto. What's the answer? While Naruto sighed to himself. It's time to behave like the prick I am supposed to be. That's how a real ninja fights. If I were that shinobi, I wouldn't use kunai at all. I would throw one awesome cool jutsu after another and whack the enemy's ass. The blonde exclaimed. folding his arms over his chest as others began to laugh at him. Iruka's eyebrows began to twitch. Like you're ever gonna become a shinobi, you dead last. You're going to be stuck up in this academy forever. Iruka spoke, and the blonde noticed a hint of sadness in the Chunin's eyes. Quiet everyone, Naruto. As for your punishment, you will stand outside the class for this whole lecture. He grinned slyly and said, well, thanks sensei. Before leaping over the desk. With a closed-eye smile, the fair-haired man put both of his hands behind his head and started to walk down the classroom toward the exit. And as the blonde walked by, Iruka sternly said, and next time, pay more attention, Naruto. Yeah sensei, I always pay attention, he grinned and said indifferently. With a serious expression, he said to himself in his head, I always do. It's you guys who don't. The class fell silent as he made his way out. Glancing back, Naruto said, so, you're the one who has my death note, huh? His eyes grew wide as he saw what could only be described as a monster from a 6-year-old's worst nightmare. Gah! He exclaimed, collapsing onto his butt, his eyes wide as he stared at a monstrosity that was too monstrous to be called human, his pupil wide as it zoomed out in shock. Iruka, on the other hand, simply stared with twitching eyebrows at his horrified face while the students gave him strange looks. What's wrong now, Naruto? Don't think you can get me with one of your pranks again, he remarked angrily as Naruto kept staring with an open mouth and vibrating pupils at the weird creature that was standing right in front of him. The Shinigami with the shark-like pointed teeth said, seemingly amused, you might want to act like I'm not here. No one except you can see or hear me, not for now at least. By the way, the name's Ryuk, I'm a Shinigami. A Shinigami? He talked about death notes as well. He ignored his peers' remarks and Iruka's irritated calls, thinking inwardly, Iruka. Sensei is just seeing through him towards me, and no one seems to be able to see or hear him. The blonde observed something else that confirmed Ryuk's statement. The Shinigami had absolutely no shadow at all. I understand, he said to himself in a sarcastic manner, clenching his fists. The blonde rose slowly to her feet. Iruka growled, closing his eyes as the Chunin squeezed the bridge of his nose angrily. Naruto, I'm warning you. He grinned sheepishly and said, Ihihi, Gomen Iruka. Sensei. I just had the vision of you and Mizuki. Sensei kissing each other. Gotta go now, bye, before hurriedly leaving the classroom, leaving Iruka with a green face and the other students looking disgusted. Naruto, you little bastard, together with Konoha's General Hospital, Kissy. Shikaku looked seriously at a nurse and said, are you sure? Is that how she behaved? The two of them were currently standing in room number 26 with a few other staff members. The nurse muttered in a quivering voice as she sniffed to hold back her tears while another nurse put a comforting hand on her shoulder. Shikaku's expression remained professionally serious. Yes, Mitsuru. Chan and I were talking to each other when she just stopped. Her face set into this stony expression when she turned to walk into the hospital. I followed her. She then asked the recipient about someone's room number and again started to walk through the corridors. I tried to ask her if something was wrong, but she just kept ignoring me. Eventually I got frustrated and left her while she went towards the first floor. The lunch break was over, so I resumed my duties when several minutes later I heard about her death, the nurse muttered. I see. Based on how she presented the situation and the fact that Nurse Mitsuru started acting strangely out of the blue, it's possible that ninjutsu or genjutsu was used to control her. Does this imply that Kira may be able to influence his victim's behavior prior to their demise? Later, Inoichi will verify Mitsuru's recollections. After stroking his chin and turning to face the lone medical professional present, the Nara thought, it's a relief that Hokage Sama had ordered for her autopsy earlier. In Hitsugaki Akabashi's file, it was also mentioned that his medical file was missing when he was found dead in room number 21. You were the one in charge of his treatment, when was the last time you saw it? He asked as the doctor breathed deeply. He responded, obviously anxious about the circumstances, Well, I did a minor checkup on Hitsugaki-san at exactly 3:30 p.m., so that was the last time I'd seen the file, as Shikaku's eyes widened slightly. And the staff discovered them both dead at around 4 p.m., so, someone took it during these 30 minutes. He thought for a moment before asking, this seems too suspicious to be just labeled as a coincidental theft of the file during those 30 minutes, when Mitsuru was maybe in control. When one of the nurses spoke, he said, This room is vacant right now. Was there any patient admitted here that day? Mitsuru died here. It could be that he might have seen something. Oh, well, there was an elder civilian admitted here and I was in charge of him. He told me that she just came through the door, threw a file out of the window and then suddenly died after a minute or so. It was his screams for help that alerted us of her death in the first place, she said as the other people nodded. She tossed a file? Akabashi's medical file is the one that needs to be present. Akabashi suffered a heart attack the day before, but he made it through. The following day, this nurse Mitsuru, who was most likely under Kira's influence, throws a file before passing away. The identical document that was pilfered approximately concurrently. Furthermore, the forensic department's reports state that Akabashi's heart stopped a few minutes after Mitsuru's. He made up his mind to head towards the open window, but first Inoichi needs to check Mitsuru's head. From this, I can infer a few important conclusions. When Kakashi and Inoichi entered the room, he muttered to himself, "So she threw the file through this window, huh? Shikaku, I've finished asking most of the staff questions. It appears they don't know any specifics that could help us. They stated that they were off duty because it was lunch break," Inoichi said as Kakashi moved to stand next to the Nara. When the copy ninja said, "I interrogated the receptionist, she told that Mitsuru had specifically asked her for Akabashi's room number," Shikaku turned to face him and his eyes slightly widened. He thought to himself, mumbling, "So she asked for Akabashi's room number, huh?" His expression thoughtful. When Mitsuru's friend, the silently sobbing nurse, stepped in, the lazy Nara thought, "Well, this proves it. Mitsuru was the one who stole the medical report." Wait, she said, grabbing their attention while dabbing at her tears. She asked in confusion, widening the eyes of Shikaku, Inoichi, and Kakashi as they did so. Why would Mitsuru-chan ask for Akabashi-san's room number when she was the one who had performed emergency procedure along with the others that morning in Akabashi-san's room? "Are you sure?" the gravely looking Yamanaka asked, nodding in agreement as the previously mentioned doctor spoke. The medic said in a shaky voice, "She is right. Since I was the one in charge for Hitsugaki's treatment, I know that Mitsuru was present there with us. However, this supports my theory that Mitsuru was under duress at the time." Shikaku turned his head to gaze out of the window and mused with a grievous look. There was no reason for her to ask someone's room number when she already knew it, and she couldn't have forgotten it so quickly after just operating on Akabashi that morning. What would be the reason for forcing her to throw Akabashi's medical file out the window if she was truly in charge of Kira? Did he arrange for someone else to gather the file for him, or did he do it himself? Even better, why would he require the medical report of Akabashi? A short while ago, with Naruto the blonde, wearing a smile, is now seen jumping through the rooftops after leaving his classroom and then the academy. "Oh, you don't need to run like your butt's on fire, you know," Ryuk exclaimed as he was now flying next to a moving Naruto, who continued to ignore him while grinning broadly. "And wipe that idiotic grin from your face, will ya? It's so fake that it gives me the chills. I wonder if I can write the name of this Shinigami. He irritates me so much," the blonde thought to herself, irritated. Ryuk spoke, causing the blonde's steps to falter slightly. "If you're wondering about killing me, then you can't. Even if you write my name in the death note," Ryuk said. "Oh, so you really were thinking of killing me? How in the hell could this be?" With twitching eyebrows, Naruto thought, his smile growing even more intense than before. The bearded blonde picked up his pace, and as he looked forward, he saw his apartment at last. "Hey, what's wrong now?" the Shinigami inquired, perplexed, as he accelerated as well. The apartment of Naruto left the door ajar and opened it to enter his apartment. "Hey, I could have gone through it even if you had shut the door," he said in a harsh tone as soon as he was inside the compact apartment. Naruto immediately closed the front door and went to his bedroom, locking the door from the inside. "Oh, so he really did believe me," Ryuk said as he moved from Naruto's bedroom into the living room. The Shinigami shrugged to himself and simply stepped through the locked bedroom door. He was startled to see Naruto sitting on his bed, cross-legged, his icy blue eyes glaring at the Shinigami. The room was dimly lit with the curtains closed over the window. Ryuk's eyes widened as he heard the blonde's voice suddenly grow mature. "Now, let's talk, Shinigami," Naruto said calmly, projecting a serious aura around him. Ryuk had just received an image of a whiny child high on sugar from his conversation with Iruka earlier, but this was completely out of the blue. Naruto's eyes widened slightly as he said, "Well, as I introduced myself before, I am Ryuk, the Shinigami whose death note accidentally fell into your hands. I found your death note, and it looked like a brand new notebook. What do you mean by it falling, accidentally? Where did it fall from exactly?" he asked, giving the Shinigami a confused look. "I'll give the brat that. He's fast. Yes, it is my death note. And the reason it looks to be new is because it was recently crafted by the Spirit King, the father of all Shinigami. And you can say that I'm a new Shinigami too, considering I was just recently born." The death note, however, fell from the Shinigami's realm, he explained as Naruto unexpectedly remained composed. He said with a frown, "Shinigami, huh? I guess I have to believe you on the existence of Shinigami. You just flew and phased through the door after all." He just said, but the rest of it, "I don't believe it," which caused Ryuk to look at him bewildered. "You don't believe me?" he questioned, seeming unable to understand the significance of what he had said. "Yeah, you could be bluffing for all I know. I mean, I'm a man. A boy of logic. Until I get some evidence that can support your hypothesis, I can't believe you. But I don't have any reason to lie to you, and I don't have any reason to trust you," he shot back, narrowing his eyes as the blonde continued to fix her gaze on Ryuk. Ryuk became irate and said, "What more proof do you need, you brat? A live Shinigami is standing in front of you, and you still refuse to believe me? Are you thick in the head or what?" Naruto simply stared at him, causing the Shinigami to sigh. He whispered, "Just return my death note. That's the main reason I came here. It doesn't matter anyway. Once you lose its ownership, you will lose all your memories regarding me in the death note," which the blonde picked up on right away, his eyes widening. Curious, Naruto asked, "What do you mean when I lose its ownership?" "When the death falls in the human world, the first human to touch it becomes its owner, and until that human relinquishes the ownership of that note, the Shinigami to whom the death note originally belonged to is bound to follow that human. So I'm telling you to forfeit the death note, give it back to me and I'll leave you," he said while shaking his head. His response, "I can't. Not yet at least," caused Ryuk's eyes to narrow. "I'm warning you, kid, it's for your own safety," he said in a rough, menacing tone, smirking to himself. "Give it back to me, brat, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. The human who uses the death note experiences nothing but pain and suffering, he's destined to a life of misery." The blonde simply grinned at him as he thought, "This should scare the Gaki enough to give it back to me." The Shinigami's eyes widened as Naruto laughed and said, "Unfortunately for you, Ryuk-san, I don't believe in destiny. I will forge my own path, and I can decide what's best for me myself. Thanks for your concern, by the way, even if it was all an act." "This brat," the blonde said, "you have to wait for quite some time, Ryuk, if you want your death note," as the Shinigami moved forward. Naruto, however, narrowed his eyes as he got off the bed and stood in front of Ryuk, staring into his demon-like eyes. "I'm warning you, brat, you don't want to mess with a Shinigami. Give me the note or else I'll have to kill you," he said. Ryuki could feel the cold sting of the blonde's eyes as he stared into them. There was no emotion visible in them other than fearlessness and determination. Naruto didn't appear to be at all intimidated by the Shinigami's enormous stature as he continued to stare at him for a few seconds with a dead serious expression. The blonde merely said, "You think I'm afraid of death?" in a chilly tone, his eyes fixed on Ryuk's widening eyes as if daring the Shinigami to take his life. "What kind of brat is this? A person who has no fear of dying? That's never been done before." While Naruto was grinning behind his closed eyes, he was filled with surprise. "Tchh. Like he's actually going to murder me." According to his explanation of the ownership portion of the death note, these Shinigami appear to be subject to a set of rules, which I assume were established by the Spirit King he was referring to. He was attempting to persuade me to give him the death note earlier, and now he's threatening to kill me? Apparently, he had no intention of killing me in the first place. Alternatively, it's possible that Shinigami are forbidden from doing physical harm to humans. Really, they should have used the death note if they had truly intended to kill anyone. I suppose that's why the note was sent, to kill someone. Death note may not be able to kill any Shinigami, as Ryuk previously stated that it cannot kill him. Additionally, the notebook's rules only address the death of humans. He has a 90% chance of not being able to kill me without the death note, So perhaps that's why he was so determined to reclaim ownership of it. He thought this while keeping a serious expression on the outside, and Ryuk was astounded by the boy's lack of fear. It piqued his interest. He asked, his lips slightly curving upward, "Tell me, why are you so adamant on using the Death Note? What's in it for you?" With curiosity, Naruto leapt back onto the bed and lay down, staring at the ceiling. "To explain that, I'm gonna have to tell you the story of my life first. So sit back, Ryuk, this is gonna take some time," he said. Alongside the Konoha Forensic Science Department, Kissy, Shikaku, Kakashi, Inoichi, and the pathologist who performed Mitsuru's autopsy, are currently gathered around the dissection table, where Mitsuru's lifeless body is placed beneath the evidence sheet. Even if she passed away from a heart attack, Hokage Sama had ordered us to completely check her for anything suspicious, the middle-aged pathologist said, closing his eyes and placing both of his hands on Mitsuru's head as he went through her most recent memories. "We have performed both medico, legal and clinical autopsies on her and didn't find any sign of a disease, physical or any internal injury, and no suspicious chemicals that could have been harmful to her body like a poison," the pathologist said. "I see," Kakashi said, turning to a new page in his pornographic book as Shikaku let out a yawn. "Bored," Shikaku said, "so, in which category did you place the death?" "That's the area in which we're facing problems here. You see, we divide the deaths into 5 categories, namely natural, accident, homicide, suicide and undetermined. Currently, since we are confused whether this Kira was behind her death or not, we don't know whether to put it in natural or undetermined category. Heart attack is a natural cause of death after all, but it could also be Kira's doing," he explained as Inoichi opened his gaze. Shikaku was curious, "So, what did you see?" Kakashi closed his book and turned to face the Yamanaka at this point. He said, her memories were completely normal until she talked to that nurse who was her friend. But then suddenly, it all went black. It was a blank, Shikaku, which caused Nara to smirk slightly and Kakashi to ask inquisitively. "A blank?" "Yes, when the victim is being controlled by someone, either it be through a genjutsu or a ninjutsu. A black void forms in their memories. We Yamanaka call this black void as a blank in common language. It's a simple concept actually, since the victim was being controlled at that time. It wasn't his or her memories, but rather the memories of the user, who had used the genjutsu or ninjutsu on the victim," he explained. The Junin nodded in agreement. His smirk broadened. "This demonstrates it, thus Kira did all of the work. After gaining control of Mitsuru, he forced her to ask for Akabashi's room number, gather the medical file, and go to room number 26, where she threw it out the window. This indicates that Kira required that file, and Akabashi passed away soon after the file was thrown out the window. I'm not sure how he manipulates the victims. Perhaps Kira is a Yamanaka, or he may be looking to one for assistance." Inoichi: "No, if he was the one responsible, he would have lied to us and just not disclosed to us that Mitsuru had a blank in his memory. Nevertheless, it is still unclear why he would require the medical records in order to kill Akabashi by heart attack. I can infer this much from the evidence we have so far. Kira was the reason behind the heart attack the day before. However, it appears that he was unable to kill him entirely for some reason. However, Kira killed him the following day shortly after obtaining the medical file. He has also been using these heart attacks to kill a great deal of people. I.e., he needs something in common with them in order to kill them, something that was unquestionably present in that medical record. What common information, if any, can be obtained from a patient's medical report?" He thought gravely, stroking his chin as the Nara strained his mind. "The only information they give you about a person is the tests carried out on him, type of disease or an injury with which he was injured or died." At that moment, his eyes widened. "In Naruto's apartment with Naruto and Ryuk, and so, now that you know how my childhood was, I'll tell you. I simply want to eradicate evil from this world just like any normal human wants to. And now that I possess the power, I would do it. But first, I want to clean this village. First, I will have my vengeance on those who made me live a shitty life. And then comes the usual bad guys, criminals and all," he said, his expression grim. Ryuk was currently wearing an expression that was impossible to read. "Well, I guess I can understand your situation. But still, are you doing this only for revenge? Maybe you're doing this to vent your frustration on the world for how they treated you? Do you ever think as to who made you the judge as to determine what is right and wrong? As to who deserves to die and live? Are you trying to become a god, Uzumaki Naruto? He asked as the blonde's eyes narrowed and he abruptly got up. He said inquiringly, God? With a severe frown on his face. I'm not trying to become a god, nor do I want to become one. When I was a child, L always wanted a normal life, a life that of a normal human. Now you know where I stand, with a thing as powerful as the Death Note in my hands. What do you expect me to do then? Give it back to you. I have an opportunity to shape the views of this world, not change it actually. It's simple, okay. I want to erase as much hatred from this world as possible. It doesn't matter to me if the people see me as a god, a murderer, a monster or whatever. I'm just doing what my heart is telling me to do. He spoke calmly as Ryuk just stood there, impressed by the 12-year-old blonde's maturity. I know that some of my reasons are selfish. I'm also killing those who have been beating me since I was thrown out of the orphanage. It's selfish of me, I know, but I'm a human too, Ryuk, and I will never forget that. That's why I can never be a god. I'm not a saint who can just bear whatever shit people throw at me. You tell me, what's my fault here? Who deserves to live my life? What do you call those bastards out there who have mercilessly beaten an orphan child since he could walk? He yelled, his voice growling as Naruto clenching his fists. The blonde's eyes widened as he balled his fists and a smirk appeared on his face. I understand, kid. No one deserves the kind of life you had. Even we Shinigami have a better existence than yours. So, are you really serious about this? Do note that the person who uses Death Note, upon dying, cannot go to hell or heaven. It's a curse that the user carries with him forever, he said in a serious tone. He said with a somewhat dejected expression, hey, my life is already shitty as it is. What happens after this doesn't matter to me. At least I'll be doing something good. Besides, killing someone in the world of shinobi is not a big thing. I'll take my chances, I guess. If I have to serve the world in the shadows under the name of Kira, then so be it. Even if on the outside, I'm just a monster to them. Ryuk looked at him with an understanding expression. He said with a sour laugh, in a way, I'm just like you, Ryuk. In a way, I'm just like a Shinigami. If anyone sees me, they scream monster. Who is this human? Shinigami carrying a Death Note, Uzumaki Naruto. Using Hokage's Tower Kissy. So Inoichi, I guess then she has a blank too. Shikaku, who was standing with Hiruzen and Kakashi by his side, questioned with a grin of excitement. But the Yamanaka, the Hokage's secretary, was now going through Akio's memories. Inoichi withdrew his hand from her head, his face displaying shock, and Akio opened her eyes idly. With a comforting smile, Hiruzen said, you can return to your duties, Akio-san. However, he noticed that she had a worried look on her face, as if she was afraid the Yamanaka had discovered something bad. She gave him a pathetic nod, then walked out of the Hokage's office as Kakashi shut the door and turned on the sound barrier. Inoichi asked with wide eyes, She did, just like in the case of those guards out there. But, how did you predict this? Hiruzen and Kakashi also displayed curious looks. Well, I explained to you before how I came to the conclusion that Kira was controlling Mitsuru, right? And when Inoichi confirmed it after going through her memories only proved that. Now there was a question, why would Kira need Akabashi's medical file to kill him? It became clear to me that the minor heart attack in Akabashi's case before the day of his death was also most probably Kira's work. Meaning, for some reason, he couldn't kill Akabashi before. But after gaining the medical report, he immediately died of another heart attack. You think, a patient who lays unconscious on a bed. How can he die of heart attack when he just had one the previous day? Clearly it was Kira, I'm sure now. Kakashi asked, nodding at Nara, so you're saying that there was something in that medical report which Kira needed to kill Akabashi? Yes, now think. What could be so important in a medical report of a patient that could allow Kira to kill him? Something important that has been allowing him to kill all these criminals and civilians over the week. It can't be the tests and diagnosis performed on the patient, which leaves, he said with a smirk. He said, understandingly, the only thing left is the patient's personal information, to which both Kakashi and Inoichi nodded, a surprise to them both. Yes, but I still had to find the specific info which Kira needed among the personal information of a person. It could be his name, address, blood group, age, exact date of birth, even his photo, but that's highly unlikely considering you can just see a person's face easily without gaining something like a medical report of a patient. Then something clicked into my mind. The Nara looked amused as Kakashi opened his eyes. That how does he gains personal information about those dying in the prison for the last week, considering that their personal details are kept secret and are only within Hokage Sama's possession? Yeah, but there was also this possibility of information being leaked by someone. There were several possibilities actually, but to get your hands on this information, Kira must have had done something right. Like maybe breaking in through, but that was highly unlikely considering the security's usually tight here. And even if he had broken in here, the guards or the others in the security staff must have either died of heart attacks or, Inoichi added in an animated tone, or someone must have been controlled by Kira, just like in the case of Mitsuru. He said, and that's why I had you check everyone's memories here in the Hokage Tower, even Hokage Sama's Anbu bodyguards. Earlier, all of this was just a theory, but after witnessing the results, I was right all along I guess, as Hiruzen was deep in thought, wondering how Kira could have managed Akio and his guards to gain access to the prohibited criminal records. However, criminal records also include personal data like name, age, blood type, and other details. Thus, we are still unaware of the precise item he needs in order to carry out this enigmatic method of his. Although the names of the local thugs and civilians who also perished in the streets are not very important, I am focusing on the name portion of the information. However, how can one find out details like the age or even blood type of a local thug? He walked towards the office, the Nara staring out of the large window, thinking to himself, no, it most probably has to be the name. But I'm still not sure. Even so, we've come a long way in just one day, Kira, and it won't be long before we catch up with you. However, I find it puzzling how someone's identity alone could cause a heart attack and kill them. All of the Yamanaka clan, with the exception of Inoichi, is currently under my suspicion radar, he thought to himself as he went over the day's events again in an attempt to find any missing information that he might have overlooked. What about Akabashi? Have you checked his memories? His memories can also provide us with some clues. His body too is currently in the autopsy department. We should at least use that to our benefit, right? Kakashi suggested that Shikaku face palm himself. How did I get to be so reckless? With a serious tone, Shikaku asked, Inoichi, are you up for another round in the autopsy center? Which caused Yamanaka to grin. He grinned and said, of course. Who knows, we might be able to solve this mystery in just one day. While Hiruzen was thinking of his own things. When was Kira able to obtain access to the criminal records? They are either constantly locked behind extremely high security seals or they are not present when I'm at work. Since Akio-san leaves in the evening, it must have been during the daytime since he also used the guards down there in Akio-san. Kira, when precisely did you get the chance? Inoichi, you up for another round to the autopsy center? Shikaku asked seriously, making the Yamanaka smirk. Of course. Who knows, we might be able to solve this mystery in just one day. He exclaimed with a smile while Hiruzen had his own thoughts going on in his mind. When did Kira have the chance to get his hands on the criminal files? Either they're always locked under high-level security seals, or are out when I'm working. He also used Akio-san and the guards down there, so it has to be under the broad daylight considering Akio-san leaves during the evening. Kira, when did you exactly get the chance? Konoha. Naruto's apartment. Say Ryuk, earlier you said that when I lose the ownership of the Death Note, I lose all the memories regarding its existence and you. What's the deal with that? Naruto asked while lying on the bed, his hands behind his head as he gazed at the ceiling. Well about that, it's as simple as I said. If you lose or transfer its ownership, and lose your memories, Ryuk answered, currently floating in mid-air as he too stared at the ceiling. Transfer? This caught the blonde's attention? Yeah, suppose if you don't want the Death Note. You can transfer it to me or someone else. To transfer it, you touch the Death Note to the one who you want to be its next owner, then say something like, I quit, or I forfeit, or transfer, or anything that makes sense and you get rid of the note. Also, if someone ever touches the Death Note, or even a piece of its page, then they will be able to see me, aside from the owner of course. A bored expression on his face as he turned towards Naruto. Why do you ask? Nothing, just curious. If I'm using Death Note, I should know as much as I can about it, you know, he murmured before turning his gaze towards the floating Shinigami. Those rules, you said the Spirit King gave the new Death Note to you. So did he write those new rules? He asked in curiosity, a calm expression on his face. Hi, old Pops wrote those rules. In fact, every new Shinigami receives a new Death Note with those written rules to get us started with. The rest is up to us to explore its full potential. As I told you earlier, a new death note given to us is at its weakest in the beginning. Its power increases with the number of people being killed by that death note. And the strongest death note is in the possession of the Spirit King himself, he explained before Naruto uttered. Increase in its power, huh? Death note is already godly as it is. What more do you have to improve about it? The only thing improving that I can think of is its range, right? Well, actually, I didn't get the time to think about this. Old Pops said that we have to observe the differences ourselves, but what you say is most likely right. Still, you never know about the death note. It has so much potential in the living world that even the most experienced Shinigami aren't able to use it to its full effect. Ryuk verbalized with a thoughtful expression on his face while Naruto was currently staring out through the window, gazing into the orange, blue sky due to the sunset. Today's Friday, and the academy graduation exams will take place on Monday. I may have to use Death Note this time, he pondered with a serious expression. Several hours later, Nara Clan District, Shikamaru's home. So, how was your day, Shika? Shikaku asked with the shogi board in front of him while his son was sitting on the opposite side of the small table. Troublesome, Shikamaru sighed as they played shogi in his room. Currently he was thinking on his next move while Shikaku yawned, his mind still on the case they had started investigating today. Now what would Naruto do in this case? The young Nara muttered involuntarily while Shikaku's eyebrows lifted in surprise. Naruto? He asked when Shikamaru cursed under his breath. Does Naruto play shogi with you? Shikaku asked in curiosity while Shikamaru was sweating a bit now. He had promised Naruto that he wouldn't tell anybody about them playing shogi together. But well, it's only 2-san. I'm sure he wouldn't tell anyone a thing as troublesome as this, he thought before sighing to himself. Yeah, and he's pretty good at it. I've never been able to beat him in this game anyway, he stated while Shikaku's eyes now widened in shock. That boy, the supposed dead last and a 2-time failure of the academy, had beaten his son in every single game in shogi. Come on, you serious? I mean, Uzumaki Naruto? Shikaku asked in surprise, a chuckle escaping his lips as he thought his son might be trying to crack up a joke. A poor one at that though. You troublesome guy, I'm saying the truth. If you don't believe me, I'll call him someday and then you can play with him and see for yourself. Shikamaru uttered with narrowed eyes. He didn't like how people often tended to underestimate his blonde friend and think so low of him just because he acted like a goofball. Shikaku's chuckle though immediately died down upon hearing the serious tone in his son's voice. So he really has beaten you in every single game you guys played together? He asked, as if to make sure when his son nodded with a serious expression. Uzumaki Naruto, Shikaku was surprised. Personally, he didn't hate the kid or anything like that. In fact, he considered the civilians as idiots to behave like they usually did with the blonde. He along with Shuza and Inoichi had several times sided with the boy when it came to making important decisions concerning him. He was the Jinchuriki of Konoha after all. But this was definitely interesting. So there's more to that boy than it meets the eye after all. Konoha. Hokage's office, 9:13 p.m. Wham. Hey Gigi. How ya doing? Naruto yelled with a goofy grin on his face as he kicked open the door making it slam against the hinges while Hiruzen face palmed himself. Oh wow, you really look like an idiot right now, Ryuk commented, a finger under his chin as he stared at Naruto's face while the blonde just ignored him. Naruto.kun. How many times do I have to teach you on how to enter? He asked with an exasperated sigh while the blonde just ignored him as he jumped on the sofa, sitting on it carelessly. So, what brings you here at this time? Hiruzen asked with a warm smile when the blonde turned towards him. First of all, how the heck did those guards out there let me enter so easily? Usually I have to do the sexy jutsu to knock them out and then enter this building. He spoke in his childish hyperactive tone while the Hokage chuckled to himself in embarrassment. Well, let's just say I found how they were treating you. From now on, you don't have to worry about them or anyone else stopping you from reaching me here, he explained making the blonde burst into a bright smile. That's so cool Gigi, he exclaimed while truthfully, when Inoichi had read their minds today. He had later informed Sarutobi of their actions. So with some threats concerning their job security and giving them a warning of a lovely trip to Ibiki in the deepest chambers of the T&I department, they had nodded furiously as if their wives were threatening them with a "no sex" banner. Just before Naruto had barged in through, Hiruzen was sitting idly on his chair. As usual his paperwork pending. but still his mind was automatically wandering towards the investigation. He was mainly baffled as to how Kira could have gotten information regarding the prisoners. "Nay Gigi, the graduation exams are on Monday, right?" the blonde asked, currently laying on the couch while Hiruzen nodded. "I really hope I can pass this time," he muttered with a down expression while the old Hokage gazed at him with a soft expression. "You just give your best, Naruto-kun. I'm sure you're going to become a really strong shinobi one day," he encouraged the whiskered blonde, who slowly smiled a bit. A comfortable silence settled between the two as Hiruzen again found his thoughts shifting towards the Kira case. "Hey Gigi, you caught Kira yet? You said you were going to do something about him, right?" Naruto asked with innocent curiosity when Sarutobi smiled at him. "Not yet, my boy. Today we formed an investigation team and are very close to finding Kira," he verbalized with some pride while this got Naruto's attention. "Very close, huh? You are? In just one day? That's awesome, old man," he exclaimed with a goofy grin, making the Hokage chuckle. "When you find that Kira, give him a punch from my side too, will ya? That murderer is crazy. How can he kill all those innocent civilians? If I get my hands on him someday, I'll whack that idiot's ass into the next orbit," he exclaimed in childish anger while Hiruzen smiled at him fondly. "This kid sure can act," Ryuk thought, impressed with the 12-year-old blonde. "It's a wonder he can still retain that innocence even after how all the villagers treated him. You truly are something, Naruto-kun," he thought. Yeah, he really is something. Whereas Naruto inwardly was thinking of how far they could have gotten into the investigation in just one day. The way Gigi smiled so confidently, it's as if they really are close. But really, if they are so close to solving the case, how come Gigi told me that they are close to solving this case? This only means that they have suspicion on someone else instead of me. If I was under their radar, Gigi would never have told me that they had almost finished the investigation. Instead, he would have acted like they hadn't gotten anywhere if I was the prime suspect, he thought while on the outside, the blonde had an angry pout on his face. "So Gigi, then as the awesome Hokage, you must be the cool leader of this Acumen Pantstigation, right?" he asked, making sure to keep his vocabulary and his tone as that of a child while Hiruzen blushed at the new word the blonde had invented. "Cum.in. Pants. Tigation," he thought with a sweat drop while Naruto himself was inwardly blushing. "PFFT ta ha 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 ha. Oh, that's G. Gree. Ha 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 ha." The blonde cursed as Ryuk started laughing loudly, now making his presence known. "One time my tongue slips and a word like this comes out," Naruto thought, his eyebrows twitching inwardly while the Shinigami behind him continued to laugh. Definitely have to share this, my friends up there. GHGHHAHAH ha ha ha. AHM, yes, Naruto-kun, I'm the one leading the investigation. Though I can't tell you who's in this team for security purposes," Hiruzen spoke, making the blonde pout. "Oh come on, but is there someone in the team who I might know?" he asked in excitement while Sarutobi contemplated on his answer. "He's just a kid. And I'm sure Naruto can keep his mouth shut. He has so many people scorning him, someone has to show trust in him," the professor thought with a soft expression before he smiled at the blonde. "Well, you'll be happy to hear this. Your Oni-san is in the investigation team too," he verbalized while Naruto's eyes widened as his face burst into a foxy grin. "Really, I knew Ni-san was so awesome," he exclaimed with an ecstatic grin while Ryuk looked at the exchange in confusion. Ni-san, but he told me that he was an orphan. So Hatake Kakashi, huh? Not surprising considering his Sharingan can be really useful in cases like this, Naruto pondered as he continued to talk to the Hokage. What he came here to do had been done. As soon as I reach my apartment, there's a whole lot of work to do tonight. Time to know what they've deduced from their investigation so far, Hatake Kakashi, huh? Next day. Saturday morning. 7:03 a.m. Torture and Interrogation Department. Ibiki's office. "Alright, so we will meet at this time daily," Hiruzen spoke as now the group of 5 working in the Kira investigation case were currently gathered in Ibiki's office. The rest of them nodded when Shikaku glanced at Inoichi. "You look tired. Didn't sleep yesterday?" he asked with a raised eyebrow when Inoichi yawned. "I don't know. Maybe it's because of my anxiety concerning this case that I couldn't sleep properly," he answered with a chuckle, making the Nara smirk. "So, you brought him like I asked you to this morning?" he asked the Yamanaka, who nodded. "He should be here any moment," he answered while Kakashi, Ibiki and Hiruzen looked at them in confusion. Hokage. Sama, from today onwards, whenever we meet every day, Inoichi will check our memories of the previous day for any possible blanks to make sure that none of us were controlled by Kira. Shikaku uttered in a serious tone, making them nod. That's a good idea. This will ensure that none of us are being controlled by Kira during the investigation, Ibiki stated in agreement. But who will check Inoichi's memories? Surely he can't check his own memories for blanks. I don't think that's possible for a Yamanaka, Kakashi said, making Inoichi nod. That's true. That's why Shikaku had asked me this morning to bring someone from the Yamanaka clan who is also proficient in our mind-reading techniques, the blonde verbalized with a serious expression when they heard someone knocking at the door. Wait a minute. Inoichi yelled when he looked at Kakashi, who nodded before he released the barrier around the office. Come in. Shikaku spoke in a lazy tone when the door opened for them. See another Yamanaka enter the office. He was a middle-aged man, probably older than Inoichi. Ah, thanks for coming, Kusho-san. Inoichi greeted the older man with a smile. No need to thank me, Inoichi. Sama. Good afternoon, Hokage. Sama, Morino-san. Hitaki-san. Nara-san. Kusho bowed lightly, showing respect to the big names in Konoha while they bowed back in greeting. I'm honored that I was chosen to help you in this case, the Yamanaka spoke as he walked towards Inoichi. You know what to do, Kusho-san, Inoichi stated with a serious expression while Kusho nodded back. He started to go through a few hand seals when Shikaku interrupted. Wait, the others looked at him in confusion. Inoichi, first check Kusho-san's memories for any possible blanks. We have to be absolutely sure that Kira isn't controlling him right now, or that he hasn't done so in the past, he spoke, making Kusho's eyes widen while Hiruzen had to admit that Shikaku was right. But I would know if I'm being controlled. We're Yamanaka after all, he said seriously when Hiruzen spoke. Just do what he says, Kusho-san. If you are, or was under Kira's control, trust me that you wouldn't even know that you were being controlled. That's why Kira is very dangerous. Kusho's eyes widened in surprise. Still, his expression seemed to be hesitant while Inoichi went through a short set of hand seals before placing his hands on the older Yamanaka's head. A few seconds later, Inoichi suddenly released the technique, his eyes wide in shock. A.B. Blank, the previous night, around midnight. And it seems he was controlled for about 3 hours. Inoichi stammered, making their eyes widen while Kusho took a startled step backwards. W. What do you mean? If I was being controlled, I would have known, he spoke while Shikaku narrowed his eyes. He was shocked over this, but still, as a shinobi, remaining calm in these types of situations was expected of them. Now why would Kira control Kusho-san? What could he gain by this? Even though skilled and famous in the Yamanaka clan, Kusho-san isn't that any important, nor was anyone killed last night. What could Kira gain by this? Calm down, Kusho-san. We can't change what has happened. You should be happy that you're alive here even after coming in contact with Kira, the Nara said with a grim expression while others stayed quiet. Alright, you can proceed, Kusho-san. Hiruzen spoke as the Yamanaka started to go through the same set of hand seals, a nervous expression on his face when he put his hands on his fellow Yamanaka's head. Almost 20 seconds had passed while Kusho's face had remained impassive the whole time, when his eyebrows suddenly scrunched up. No way, he muttered, his eyes still closed when he released the technique abruptly, an expression of shock on his face. Oh no, Hiruzen murmured. He knew what had happened while Inoichi opened his eyes slowly. There's a blank in his memories too. In fact, the blank occurred yesterday, around midnight, same time as mine. And considering the length of the blank, I'd say Inoichi Sama was under control for about 3-4 hours too, Kusho stammered while Kakashi, Shikaku and Hiruzen had expressions of disbelief on their faces. Damn it! Ibiki yelled as he slammed his fist on the table, an angry expression on his face while the members of the Kissy group stood there stunned. That bastard! He got to us first, and now he probably knows everything that we investigated yesterday, the interrogation specialist exclaimed loudly. Why? Yesterday? Shikaku stuttered, a startled expression on his face making Kusho nod. Yes, as I said, around midnight, he confirmed while Inoichi too stood there speechless. But I was probably sleeping at that time. He tried to defend while Shikaku began to massage his temples. Stop, don't lose your cool, Inoichi. You already know that you wouldn't even know if you're being controlled by Kira. It now goes as to show how strong Kira's mind-controlling technique really is. He even controlled you without you being aware of it. Silence engulfed the group as they contemplated on what to do. Ibiki's right. Kira now probably knows of what we investigated yesterday. That's the only reason I can think of as to why he controlled Inoichi in the middle of night. Kira must have met him somewhere. Shikaku spoke with a grim expression while Inoichi just couldn't believe this. He was sleeping, damn it. It just didn't make any sense. You can go now, Kusho-san. From now on, you will check Inoichi's memories daily. Hiruzen ordered the Yamanaka, making him nod. Wait, Kusho-san. The Nara spoke, staring blankly at the table, making him stop. Inoichi, you go with him and erase his memories concerning what happened here. We can't make any more rookie mistakes, he murmured, making their eyes widen while Inoichi nodded, taking Kusho, who himself had a hesitant expression on his face, outside with him. From now on, we will follow this procedure daily. Inoichi will check Kusho-san's memories first, and then Kusho-san will check Inoichi's memories. After that, Inoichi will lead him outside where you will erase Kusho-san's memories. And then, Inoichi will check our memories for any possible blanks. Now even I'm not sure if I haven't been controlled by Kira already. Shikaku spoke as he sat on a chair by the table while Ibiki, Kakashi and Hiruzen nodded. I know this is too troublesome to do every day, but when it comes to Kira, we can't be making any mistakes. Also, Hokage-sama, make sure that you order some newly appointed Anbu to follow our movements all the time. So even if we are being controlled by Kira outside the investigation time, the Anbu can track our movements and report any suspicious activity. This way, we can possibly catch Kira if he ever again tries to control any one of us. Even though not sure, I'm almost certain that Kira used Inoichi the previous night to know of how far we've reached in our investigation, he continued when Inoichi entered the room while Kakashi activated the barrier again. Though what bothers me the most is how Kira could have immediately come to know that we had started the investigation. How did he even know that Inoichi was in the investigation team? I do have one prime suspect for this case, but this. I still can't believe I was controlled, Inoichi muttered in a disturbed voice as he grabbed his forehead, not knowing what to make of this when Ibiki put a comforting hand on his shoulder. Don't worry, Inoichi, it was not your fault. It could have been any one of us. We just didn't expect that he would make his move just after the first day of our investigation. Hokage-sama, did Uzumaki Naruto, after we left your office, did Naruto Uzumaki came to meet you? Did any of you came in contact with him? Shikaku asked in a bit of loud voice, making their eyes widen in surprise. Naruto? Where'd that kid come from? Naruto-kun. What does he have to do with this? Hiruzen asked in confusion while Kakashi too was surprised. Just answer me please. Did any one of you came in contact with him after we left for our homes? He asked, this time somewhat pleading them to cooperate with him. Inoichi had to admit, Shikaku rarely got so worked up like this. But still, for Kami's sake, he couldn't understand why his old friend was involving the blonde prankster in this. This was one of the most important cases in Konoha's history involving mass murder. Well, he did come yesterday at around 9 and just goofed around in my office. The Hokage spoke, making Shikaku's eyes widen just a bit when he turned to Inoichi. Inoichi, start checking our memories, nodding in agreement. The Yamanaka started with Kakashi as he activated his technique when Sarutobi turned towards Shikaku. I know what you're going to ask, Hokage-sama. Wait until Inoichi checks all of our memories first, Shikaku interrupted, making the professor nod. But I'm confused about what you said earlier. What did you mean by newly appointed Anbu to follow us? Shouldn't we use the more experienced ones? No, this Kira seems to be pretty smart to me, and I wouldn't put it past him to know the names of the famous Anbu here in Konoha. I want some fresh Anbu, the identity and personal info of whom is still most probably unknown to Kira. This will ensure that he doesn't control them too. And please make sure to increase the security in your office concerning the paperwork, especially the ones involving identities of our Anbu and criminals, he explained, making Hiruzen nod. He was impressed. The professor knew that Shikaku was a gifted strategist for Konoha. But still, the way he had devised a solution in a matter of minutes when the others were panicking, it was something else. Hokage-sama, tell me, did you talk to Naruto about anything related to this investigation? the Nara asked with a serious expression as he shifted his gaze towards the fire shadow. We did. But I didn't tell him anything about the investigation, only that I was the one leading this case, and Kakashi, who he holds very close to him, was also a part of this squad. This made Shikaku's eyes widen as he snapped his head towards Kakashi, whose memories Inoichi was currently reading. Could it be? He's clean, Inoichi uttered as he released his technique while Shikaku sighed in relief, but there was a confused expression on his face while the Yamanaka moved on to Ibiki now. Konoha. Naruto's apartment. I wish I could see their faces, Naruto spoke with a smirk as he sat on his chair, happily eating his ramen while Ryuk was eating an apple, having stolen it from a local shop. You still haven't told me how you knew about that Inoichi blonde being a part of the investigation team. I thought you were going to control this Ni-san of yours. What was his name again? Oh, Kakashi, right. The Shinigami spoke while Naruto nodded. If I had controlled Kakashi.Ni-san, then I probably would have been a day away from getting caught and being executed, he stated, making Ryuk look at him confusion while back in his room, under a false tile, on the floor, were the papers containing info about everything the Kissy team had investigated yesterday. Still, I never imagined that they could come this far in just one day. Nara Shikaku, just like your son, you're really something. But my ultimate weapon is my act, the idiot Naruto. I've influenced Gigi so heavily that it's almost impossible for him to even suspect me. I don't think Gigi will make Inoichi check my memories. He does trust me blindly after all, he thought, a serious expression now on his face when he turned to the floating Shinigami who was staring at him in anticipation. Ryuk, after hearing Gigi say that they were close to solving this case, I had become skeptical and a bit paranoid. Even if most probably this investigation team didn't have suspicion on me, I still didn't want to take any risks by controlling Ni-san. But how does controlling that Kakashi guy makes you fall in danger? Ryuk asked, making the blonde roll his eyes as he sighed in exasperation. Come on. It's obvious, isn't it? Gigi told me yesterday that Hitaki Kakashi was a part of the investigation. Gigi himself said that no one knew about the identity of the Kissy group. And now, aside from them, only I knew that Kakashi and Gigi himself were a part of this group. So if Kakashi would have found that he was being controlled, after I'd eliminated the influence of the Death Note, of course, then he would have informed Gigi of this. You think, just after Gigi tells me about Kakashi being a member of Kissy, he gets controlled the same night. Immediately, most probably I would have come under dead suspicion, he explained, making the Shinigami open his mouth in the form of an "oh" in realization while the blonde gazed outwards through his window. Still, I didn't know yesterday that people being controlled by Death Note aren't even aware of it. Even though the reasons for my actions were different, my actions were still correct. Now that I know how Kissy is operating, if I would have controlled Kakashi.Ni-san, they immediately would have found a blank in his memories. I mean, considering Shikaku's intelligence, I'm sure he would have Inoichi check each of their memories to ensure I didn't or don't control any one of them in the coming future. It's a good thing I made my move before he could take any precaution, he thought, rubbing his whiskered cheek with the index and middle finger of his right hand. But hey, you still haven't told me as to how you knew about that Inoichi guy being in the investigation team, Ryuk uttered, making him sigh as he turned his head towards the Shinigami. It's a damn pain in the ass to explain him everything. If you think rationally, anyone should be able to come at the conclusion that a Yamanaka must be a member of this investigation team. In fact, considering the mind-reading abilities of the Yamanaka clan in Konoha, whenever mystery cases like this have to be solved, a Yamanaka is a must in an investigation team. Their abilities are one hell of an asset in any case. So now you think, a case as big as one as this, where Kira has regularly been killing so many civilians and criminals for a week now, they would have to hire some top-class Yamanakas in this, he explained, making Ryuk nod. I see, that's pretty smart, Gaki. However, if you knew that Inoichi, the head of the Yamanaka clan, was a member of the investigation team, then why did you control other Yamanakas in addition to him yesterday? The new Shinigami asked while Naruto stood up somewhat lazily from his chair. Actually, I wasn't sure if Yamanaka Inoichi was a part of the investigation team. I just knew that one of the members of the team had to be a Yamanaka. A skilled one at that. So that's why I wrote the names of popular Yamanakas like Inoichi, Kusho, Amari, Nuha and some others in the Death Note, expecting for at least one of them to be a member of this Kissy group, the whiskered blonde said, making the Shinigami nod while Naruto began to wash the dishes in the kitchen. But I'm curious as to what you wrote concerning the conditions of their deaths in the death note. As you earlier told me, if you state something in the death note which is impossible for a victim to do, then he automatically dies of heart attack. So yesterday, when you didn't know Inoichi was a part of this Kissy group, what did you write regarding the conditions for their deaths? All I know is that you made these Yamanakas write about the investigation on some blank papers and bury them in the forests outside the village. I'm asking this because only Inoichi knew what had happened in the investigation so far, so the other Yamanakas, whose name you wrote in the death note, should have immediately died of heart attacks as they didn't know anything about the investigation. So did you kill them in the process? He asked while an amused smirk formed on Naruto's face as he continued to wash dishes whereas Ryuk ate his apple, standing behind him. You would have known about this if you weren't too busy in stealing those apples, he mocked, making the Shinigami grunt as he finished the apple, now looking at him for some answers. Yes, I did write their death conditions as you just said. But they are all alive, none of them is dead, he uttered with a serious expression, now sitting on the slab while Ryuk's eyes widened in surprise. They're alive. But how? You just sigh. First listen to me. In the death conditions for each of those Yamanakas, I specified that they would write everything they knew about the Kira investigation case on some blank papers, seal them in storage scrolls and then bury it on a spot in the forests outside Konoha. That spot is a famous location, so that eliminated the possibility of them not knowing about the whereabouts of the location and then dying immediately by heart attacks. But now comes the main, but a pretty easy thing to solve. I just stated that if they knew about the Kira investigation case, then they would write the details on some blank pages, else, they would simply write on a blank paper. I don't know, before sealing it into a storage scroll. So ultimately what happened exactly was that Yamanaka Inoichi wrote everything on some blank papers while everybody else wrote, I don't know, and after that, they sealed these papers in separate storage scrolls, writing their names on it so that I would know whose is the member of the Kissy group and then finally burying it, he explained, taking a deep breath in the end while Ryuk had his eyes widened in surprise. It sounds pretty easy the way you say it, wonder why it didn't come to my mind, the Shinigami spoke, scratching the underside of his chin thoughtfully while Naruto chuckled. Your mind may get sharper if you eat ramen instead of apples, you know, the blonde muttered, making Ryuk, HMPH, in response. Also, another advantage of this was that I got some free storage scrolls, I was getting low on them and the shopkeepers wouldn't sell it to me. As they say, two birds with one stone, he murmured to himself quietly, a proud smirk on his face. But what you did seems pretty risky to me, Ryuk said, making Naruto shrug. Fearlessness, Ryuk, it was all calculated. But still, you're right, I guess. I also could have them write their memories of past 24 hours. This way too, I would have known who is the member of Kissy and the details of their investigation. But then I would have had to read all of their memories and find the specific parts regarding the investigation. I'm too lazy for that, the blonde verbalized with a sigh while Ryuk's eyes widened. Hey, that's an even better idea. You should have done that, the Shinigami exclaimed, making Naruto give him the, are you deaf? Look. Like I said, too lazy to go through their fucked up stories of their past 24 hours. I don't like reading, you know, he uttered, making Ryuk sweat drop at the stupid answer. You are a very strange human, Naruto, you know that? Hey, thanks for the compliment. Today's Saturday and graduation exams are on Monday, only 2 days to go. To form a plan to pass the graduation exams, first I need to know the major secret here, about why people in general hate me. It has to be tonight, though I know it would be one hell of a shocker. And then there's this taijutsu practice session today too. But the main. His thoughts were interrupted when suddenly his door was knocked hard, very hard, making the blonde curse under his breath. Take this up your ass, you demon, came a shout from outside the door when the newspaper slid in through the bottom of his door. I swear someday I'm gonna kill this bastard by my own hands, he thought with a frown, now picking up the newspaper. Taking it to his room, he took out several blank pages from a drawer while Ryuk followed him to his room. You're gonna kill some more people? Ryuk asked, making him, in agreement. Where's the death note? You took out pages from it, the Shinigami asked, making the blonde nod as he began searching through the newspaper. After coming to know what Kissy had investigated so far last night, I hid the death note and took out some of its pages, he muttered. It should not take them, no, Shikaku much long to declare me as a prime suspect for this case. Still, as long as I hide the death note, they shouldn't be able to gather any proof against me. But knowing them, they might find a way. Inoichi can read my memories too. I have to be prepared for any possibility. This is the world of shinobi after all. Anything is possible, he thought, writing the names of local criminals found in the newspaper when his eyes fell on a specific photograph. This guy, he thought with gritted teeth, gazing at a smiling shinobi's face. By his gear, he looked to be a Junin though. The blonde now remembered this person. He had once seen this Junin helping the civilians catch him. The motherfucker had thrown a fireball at me back then, he thought bitterly, now noticing that he had been recently promoted to Junin and was bragging in front of the Leaf media about his promotion. Bragging how his son was so happy to see his dad become a Junin. A dark smirk formed on the blonde's face as he began to chuckle, making Ryuk look at him in confusion. Huh? What's so funny? He asked when Naruto's eyes grew cold, but still he continued to chuckle, albeit a hollow one. Nothing, just nothing, he muttered, now holding his right over his face as he continued to chuckle, his cold frosty eyes now shining with cruel vengeance through his bangs. It's just that, I'm enjoying my life for once. Say goodbye to your bastard daddy, kid, he whispered with a dark expression on his face before writing the Junin's name on the note. I'll just kill these guys with heart attacks so that Shikaku does not suspect that there are other ways I can kill people aside from heart attacks. Let him know of my vengeance and justice. If he thinks I'm Kira, then I wouldn't try to run. I dare you, Shikaku, prove it, he thought as the blonde turned his eyes towards the window, gazing outside. Prove that I'm Kira, he whispered with determination in his eyes while Ryuk continued to stare at him, perplexed at the blonde's sudden change in behavior. With Kissy. T&I Department. 7:43 a.m. Alright. I have a prime suspect for this case, Shikaku spoke, making Ibiki, Kakashi, Inoichi and Hiruzen gaze at him with wide eyes. You have a prime suspect in just one day? Kakashi asked in disbelief, making the Nara nod. Who is it? Ibiki asked with a serious expression, a mysterious glint in his eyes. Oh, he was ready to do his interrogation on this Kira bastard. It's Uzumaki Naruto. Silence. Pin-drop silence engulfed the room as the other members of the Kissy group stared at Shikaku like he was crazy. N. Naruto, T. That goofy prankster? Inoichi asked with a hesitant smile, thinking it was some sort of a joke while Shikaku's expression remained serious. Yes, the prank master, the Jinchuriki of Konoha, that, Uzumaki Naruto, he answered while Kakashi and Hiruzen just stood there stunned, they were practically speechless. H. How can you say this, Shikaku? On what basis? The Hokage asked, his eyes getting narrowed as he glared at the Nara. I have reasons to validate this, Hokage. Sama. Earlier, you yourself said that Naruto had met you yesterday at around 9. And just a few hours after that Inoichi and Kusho-san were controlled. He paused a bit while Kakashi too had his lone eye narrowed. The little blonde was like his little brother and he'd be damned if anyone blamed him like this. Listen, Shikaku. If you're doing this just because you hate him for being a Jinchuriki, then. That's not the case, Kakashi. The Nara fired back sharply, surprising others by the loudness of his voice while Hiruzen stood there in silence, a grim expression on his face. Listen. Think yourself. I checked the personal records of all the innocent civilians last night, and all of them had their hands in beating him or trying to kill him. Even that nurse Mitsuru was charged heavily for having trying to kill him once almost 2 years ago. And that Akabashi guy, when yesterday I and Inoichi went back to the autopsy center to check his memories, we found that on the night before his death, he was beating Naruto in an alley with 2 of his friends. And those 2 other guys are dead too. They were killed 2 days after Akabashi was killed. He exclaimed while Hiruzen's expression remained unchanged, whereas Ibiki and Inoichi's eyes were widened in shock. And Hokage. Sama, when I asked you just a few minutes ago if Naruto had visited you a week ago, you agreed with me, right? You left him in your office for almost an hour with those files concerning the criminals in the prison out there in the open. And around that time slot, according to Inoichi, those guards and your secretary were under Kira's control. Do you think this is all just a coincidence? Shikaku exclaimed with a grim expression, taking deep breaths to calm himself while Kakashi was clenching his fists in anger. Back then, when I came back from meeting the elders, I did notice that those files had been touched, but what you don't know is that Naruto-kun had just painted the faces of those criminals. It was one of his usual pranks. I came back to find him sleeping. He was probably sleeping for most part of the hour, and it's definitely possible that Kira struck when Naruto-kun was sleeping, The boy's a heavy sleeper after all. But what you're saying is absolutely ridiculous, Shikaku. Hiruzen spoke quietly with some anger seeping into his tone at the end while the Nara just sighed, massaging his temples. Listen, Hokage. Sama. I'm not saying that Naruto is Kira. I'm saying that he's the prime suspect for this case according to me, he muttered when Kakashi snapped. You're getting crazy, Shikaku. Think yourself, we're talking about Naruto here. The blonde who has never lifted a finger against the civilians even when they had beaten him so many times, the blonde who has failed his academy graduation exams twice, the blonde who always keeps smiling, eats ramen and keeps on training. That little goofball. Just how can you even picture a bright child like him killing all those criminals and civilians? Kira is supposed to be some really strong shinobi with a godly technique in his hands, not a child who can't even form a clone. Even if we somehow believe your ridiculous theory about him being Kira, then explain how could he have killed all those people? Even if you say that Kyuubi is gaining control over him, no Biju is capable of killing anyone like this. Calm down, Kakashi. This is unlike you, Inoichi spoke quietly, placing a comforting hand on the copy ninja's shoulder who closed his eyes, clenching his fists while Shikaku gazed at the table, a grim expression on his face. Shikamaru, my son told me that Naruto has beaten him in every single game of shogi they have played so far. My son, has an IQ of over 200. Naruto is not what he really seems to be. I suspect that he's hiding the real him from us, he muttered. That's enough, Shikaku. Hiruzen spiked his chakra in anger. You can't compare a game of shogi to a case as severe as this. We are talking about murders on the scale of hundreds now, not some board game between two academy students. Even if Naruto-kun is far more intelligent than he shows himself to be, you can't blame him considering the life he has lived. Deception is a shinobi's biggest weapon, and if he really is hiding the real him, his real capabilities from us, from the village, then it's better for him. I'm sure he plans on revealing his true strength on a bigger occasion. Who knows, maybe he's waiting for the graduation exams this Monday. All of what you have stated so far, even the civilians who have beaten him being killed. It can be Kira sympathizing with the boy, he stated when Ibiki looked at him in curiosity. Do you mean to say that Kira's pitying the life the boy has lived so far and is killing those people who have wronged him? He asked, making the Sandame nod. It's the most probable case. Jinchuriki, even though widely hated in their villages, can also gain pity just as easily. Even if it is unintentional. Kira, a person possessing some godly technique, has been killing those who have committed horrible crimes. Even the day-to-day local thugs and such. Then pray tell me why, according to Kira, those civilians who have been beating an orphan child are no lesser criminals as compared to those present in the prison? It's definitely possibly that he considers them as criminals too. And you tell me, if he really was Kira, then why didn't he control me yesterday instead of Inoichi? I probably would have been the easiest target for him. The possibility of Naruto himself being Kira, it's a sin to even think about it, he exclaimed while Shikaku's eyes were currently widened. I agree with Hokage. Sama. Kakashi spoke seriously while Inoichi and Ibiki just stayed quiet, not sure whose side to take. They wouldn't even consider the possibility that Naruto could be Kira. This is bad. Even though what Hokage Sama said makes sense, still. Fine, but at least let Inoichi check his memories. This way we can be sure if he's the real Kira or not, the Nara offered while the professor narrowed his eyes when Kakashi stepped up, now losing his patience. You can't just go and check everyone's memories, and he's a Jinchuriki. Do you think it will even be safe for Inoichi to go through his memories considering the kind of life he has lived? Most of the Yamanakas denied to go through his memories in the past when we had to check the culprits responsible for beating him. You know, Kyuubi's interference can be very lethal. It may even kill Inoichi. The Junin exclaimed when Inoichi spoke, a grim expression on his face. No, Kakashi, if it is really required to check his memories, then I'm ready to take the risk, he declared, making everyone's eyes widen while Hiruzen sighed. Fine, if it makes you happy, Shikaku, we will let Inoichi check his memories. But that will happen after the graduation exams. The boy's already tense about the exams and I don't want anything to happen to him due to you checking his memories. Who knows what side effects may take place? You can wait for at least 2 days, can't you? He asked, making the Nara nod, a sigh escaping his lips. Few minutes later. Ibiki's office. After Kakashi, Inoichi and Hiruzen had left, now only Shikaku and Ibiki remained in the office. Ibiki, I need your help in something. Don't worry, it's not something big, but this should help us determine who Uzumaki Naruto really is, or who knows, we may know if he's Kira or not. Shikaku spoke as Ibiki gazed at him with a skeptical expression. You oddly seem quite adamant in proving that Naruto really is the Kira, the Tokubetsu Junin spoke, making the lazy Nara sigh. No, it's nothing personal. In fact, you know I like the kid. But if he really is the Kira, then in future, he may become a danger to the whole village. I just have this feeling, almost like sixth sense, that Naruto is somehow connected to Kira, or is Kira himself. All these events connecting to Naruto, these can't be mere coincidences, he explained, now massaging his temples in a bit of frustration. Naruto, if you really are Kira, then your act is flawless. So perfect your deception is that even Kakashi and Hokage Sama absolutely refused to even consider the possibility that you could be Kira. Still, we should know by tomorrow evening whether my suspicions are correct or not. No, it's nothing personal. In fact, you know I like the kid. But if he really is the Kira, then in future, he may become a danger to the whole village. I just have this feeling, almost like sixth sense, that Naruto is somehow connected to Kira, or is Kira himself. All these events connecting to Naruto, these can't be mere coincidences, he explained, now massaging his temples in a bit of frustration. Naruto, if you really are Kira, then your act is flawless. So perfect your deception is, that even Kakashi and Hokage Sama absolutely refused to even consider the possibility that you could be Kira. Still, we should know by tomorrow evening whether my suspicions are correct or not. Konoha. Forests behind the Hokage's monument. Where are we going? Ryuk asked as Naruto walked at a leisure pace through the forests, humming a tune with the Shinigami floating behind him. The pages I took from the Death Note have all been used up, I have to pile up on my stock. The blonde spoke in a low tone, being on full alert as he made sure that no one was following him. Even the most elite of Anbu couldn't escape his enhanced senses. You've hid the Death Note in a forest? The Shinigami asked, not knowing whether to be stunned at the blonde's guts or to laugh at his stupidity. Yeah, I have. Forests are far safer than my own apartment or any other place in Konoha, he muttered before suddenly jumping onto a branch of a tree. Hey, I thought we were supposed to walk like free men. Ryuk spoke, making Naruto roll his eyes as jumped through the dense foliage, now using ninja movements. Earlier I was just making sure that no one was following me, he exclaimed, speeding through the trees at an impressive speed with the Shinigami flying behind him. Here, landing in front of a large tree, an X marked on it, 1.6 mile mark. The same location as that mentioned in CH2. Huh? Ryuk had a confused expression on his face as he looked around the area while the blonde started to dig some dirt at a specific spot near the tree with a kunai in each hand. You buried it underground? Why? Yeah, Naruto answered as he wiped his forehead, putting his kunai back in the pouch while the Shinigami stared at a metallic box. A box? He exclaimed as the whiskered blonde dug up some more dirt around the cubicle box. Aligning his hands along its side faces, he looked to be plucking something out of the box, whereas Ryuk, upon closer inspection, found them to be several thin wires. What are those wires? He asked in curiosity as the blonde worked carefully with the box, his face scrunched up in concentration. Phew, all done. These are not some ordinary wires, they're called ninja chakra wires, he said, wiping the sweat off his forehead as the blonde now laid his right palm on the top of the metallic box, channeling chakra through it, making it click open to reveal a storage scroll. What's all this about? The Shinigami asked in confusion as the blonde now sat on the ground, carefully opening the scroll. Those wires you saw, they are about 40 in number. Those wires, branching themselves in midway, are connected to about 100 paper bombs present in this area. And this metallic box is a good conductor of chakra and opens only when the user pours some chakra into this. He paused, now having opened the small scroll. Okay, I'm assuming you took these measures for protecting the Death Note, but how does this work then? He asked in curiosity. Suppose, if someone else, by any slim chance, does find this box, their first reaction would be to pull it out. This will lead to the wires being pulled and those paper bombs will be detonated, leading to the destruction of this area along with the Death Note. Also, these chakra conductor boxes are pretty common among the shinobi, so any decent ninja would know that he has to pour some chakra to unlock it. Now some pretty smarter ones might not pull the box out and simply pour their chakra without pulling the box, wanting to see what's inside. But if he pours chakra, and since this box is a good conductor of chakra, the chakra will reach these attached wires and then onto the paper bombs. If you don't know, applying your chakra to a paper bomb detonates it, so yeah, again boom. Naruto explained, gesturing the boom part with his hands with a small smirk on his face while Ryuk stood there impressed. So that's why you first detached those wires from this box and then pulled it out, he realized, making the blonde nod as he now shifted his gaze towards the open scroll on the ground in front of him. Yeah, but it's risky. If I forget even one thin wire, an explosion will take place, he murmured, now staring at the scroll consisting of some array of seals with a large kanji for seal in the middle. But earlier you said that the shopkeepers here in Konoha wouldn't even sell a kunai. How do you get so many paper bombs, these ninja wires and this chakra conductor box? He asked in curiosity, making him smirk. Hey, well, one of the civilians I killed, he owned a shop of ninja supplies and gave me a parting gift before his death, he uttered with a toothy grin, making the Shinigami sweat drop. You mean you made him give these things to you, right? He muttered, making the blonde nod as he shifted his eyes back to the scroll. He's really giving his all in this. We Shinigami toss the note around so carelessly and look at him, protecting it like it's some kind of a treasure, Ryuk thought in amazement. Now what are you waiting for? He asked. This, the blonde stated, taking out a paper bomb from a small slit, present on the white page on the top left corner of the scroll. On the center of the scroll, drawn on the white page, are the same array of seals with a kanji for seal in the middle. Another paper bomb? Ryuk asked, now getting perplexed by the blonde's setup to protect the death note. To open a storage scroll, the user has to channel chakra through it by putting his palm on this large kanji. And as you know, chakra also detonates a paper bomb. So if someone tries to open this without first pulling out this paper bomb from this slit, which is really hard to notice, mind you, then an explosion will take place, destroying this storage scroll as well as injuring the one who tried to open this, Naruto explained while Ryuk was stunned. The limits to which the blonde was going, it really was something else. This kid is a genius. With the way he's going, he's really going to do something big someday, the Shinigami thought as the blonde tore several pages of the death note, before sealing it back in the scroll and doing the same setup. There, it's all done, Naruto spoke as he patted the recently dug up dirt with his feet, covering the metallic chakra box. Taking out the white scroll, he sealed the blank pages from the death note in it. Now on to the academy, my plan initiates now. Konoha Ninja Academy. 10 a.m., quiet everyone. Iruka yelled at the top of his lungs, silencing all the students present in the practice grounds behind the academy. He sure can scream, Ryuk commented with an annoyed expression on his face, now rubbing his ears, whereas Naruto stood beside him with a goofy grin on his face. Alright, today's the taijutsu practice day, and probably our last one together. So let's do this, he exclaimed with a smile while the students present there smiled back at him, quite ecstatic to finally become ninja. I'm gonna be a ninja in just 2 days, I can't believe it. It's like a dream come true. I wonder how our sensei would be like. I just want to go on super missions and get popular. And I'm gonna become like Tsunade Sama. I'll become a great toad sage just like Jiraiya Sama. Pathetic. All of them, just plain pathetic, Naruto thought, inwardly rolling his eyes as he listened in on other students' conversation while 2 students were currently dueling each other in taijutsu, inside a circle with Iruka observing their match. At such a young age, these kids are good, Ryuk spoke in an impressed tone, making the blonde inwardly sigh. If the Shinigami considered these sloppy moves ninja material, then he was for one heck of a surprise during his stay in the living world. In the world of shinobi. I wonder who will I fight against? As always, I have to make sure that I hold back, but I guess since the year is ending now, I can show off a little of my abilities. Still, the outcome of the match will be me losing it. Oh, it's my turn now, the blonde pondered as he walked forward, a bright, closed-eye grin on his face. Finally I get my turn. This time I will win for sure, he exclaimed loudly, eliciting response from the group of students in form of boo, s. Alright, Naruto, you will fight Sasuke today, Iruka declared, making the whiskered blonde curse under his breath. Just fucking great, so now I have to do the job with his guy. I really don't like losing to this guy. Hey Iruka. Sensei. I'll just be back in a minute. Gotta pee. He yelled, already running towards the academy while the girls made disgusted faces at this. And don't you dare skip out this last session, Naruto, the Chunin yelled in warning. He's probably too scared to fight Sasuke-kun, spoke a certain pink-haired student. After a minute later, the blonde returned with a foxy grin on his face while Sasuke was already standing in the circle. Now standing in the circle, Naruto glared at Sasuke childishly, sticking his tongue out at the Uchiha who just stared back at him with cold and calm eyes. I'm gonna beat you this time, Sasuke. This time will be different, he yelled boldly, eyebrows scrunched up while the Uchiha entered the circle, his fangirls already cheering up on. Yay Sasuke-kun. He's so cool, show that Naruto. Baka who's the boss around here. Come on Sasuke-kun. Beat that jerk. Wow, those girls sure are head over heels for him. The Shinigami, now floating beside Iruka, spoke in surprise while the blonde just continued to glare at Sasuke. Get ready you two. Iruka Amino spoke as both of them crouched while Sasuke just continued to stare at him with blank eyes. This guy sometimes really creeps me out, and that's saying something, the blonde thought with an inward shudder. Begin. The proctor, Iruka exclaimed while the female students continued to cheer Sasuke. This time, I'm going to play your game, Sasuke, Naruto thought as he stayed in his position, not having moved an inch since the start of the match while Sasuke stood in his ready stance, waiting for the blonde to attack like he usually did. However, Naruto inwardly smirked upon noticing a look of surprise in the Uchiha's eyes as both of them stood still, not moving an inch. Iruka too looked surprised by this. That's odd. Usually Naruto barges from the get-go, using straightforward attacks, but now he's just standing there, as if waiting for Sasuke to make his move, the Chunin thought while the students too were surprised by this, especially Shikamaru. So you finally are revealing yourself, YH? What's the matter, Dobi? Too scared to even move your trembling legs? The Uchiha, quite surprisingly, taunted the blonde with a smirk leading to increase in the decibel level of his fangirl club. Naruto however just stayed quiet, holding his position as he stood still like a statue, a smirk forming on his face. What's so funny? Sasuke asked with a frown, his eyes narrowing while the blonde again kept quiet. I know you hate being ignored, Teme. So come on. Naruto thought as he did the come on motion with his right hand, angering the Uchiha as the frown on his face grew deeper while Iruka himself was stunned by Naruto's response. What's happening here? Iruka thought in astonishment when Sasuke suddenly dashed towards Naruto, rearing his fist midway while the blonde just stood there, a serious expression on his face, dodging the fast punch quite easily, surprising Sasuke as well as Iruka. Gah! Sasuke exclaimed in pain as Naruto slammed his knee into the Uchiha's gut at a blurry pace, making him stumble back while blonde didn't move from his position. What the? Iruka thought in shock, his eyes wide while the students were silenced by this. Sasuke was holding his gut as he glared at Naruto, gritting his teeth. Clearly he was shocked too, but the pain was surprisingly unbearable too. That's enough demonstration for sensei, the blonde thought as he loosened himself up now, something which Iruka didn't fail to notice. Why you? Sasuke growled as he spat some saliva before again charging in. Wham! Arg! This time however, the punch connected onto Naruto's cheek as the blonde fell off his feet, sliding on the dusty ground to a halt. Sasuke however was quick to jump on him, his elbow now putting pressure on the blonde's neck while the Uchiha's other fist was ready for another punch. You lose, Dobi, Sasuke growled as he further put pressure on the blonde's neck. Naruto's eyes were currently closed in pain, gritting his teeth as he grabbed the Uchiha's wrist in efforts to pull his elbow off his neck. I forfeit, he stammered, struggling under Sasuke's grip for some desperate oxygen. Oh, Ryuk reacted in surprise to the blonde's decision while the female students erupted into their cheering mode again. That's enough, Sasuke. Naruto has forfeited the match, get off him, Iruka ordered in a stern voice when Sasuke stood up, a smirk on his face as he gazed at the blonde's panting form. Once a loser, always a loser, he spoke before walking away towards the group, his fangirls praising him for his awesomeness, while Iruka rushed to Naruto's help. Naruto, you alright? He asked as the said blonde slowly stood up, holding his neck. Why? Yeah, he uttered in a hoarse voice, coughing a bit while Iruka gazed at him in concern. The way he dodged Sasuke's punch, and then kneeing him in the gut, he was so fast, and then, suddenly the next moment, he He gets hit by Sasuke's punch as if he couldn't react to it at all, even though there was not much difference in speed from Sasuke's previous attack. Did he lose on purpose? Iruka pondered, staring at the blonde as he turned to walk towards other students. Naruto inwardly smirked as he continued to walk, staring at Iruka from the corner of his eyes while the Chunin stared back at him. I've done what I came here to do, he thought while Iruka stared at him in confusion. Ha! Teme just got lucky. Yeah, he always gets lucky, Kiba spoke, rolling his eyes at the blonde's stupidity. He's staring at me, those serious eyes, I've never seen such a look in those eyes before. Just what is he trying to do? But it looks like he's deliberately holding himself back. I have to tell Hokage. Sama. The Chunin thought anxiously as the whiskered blonde now sat under a tree, behind the group of students. Things should go according to plan, he thought, gazing at Iruka as the Chunin called other students for taijutsu spar. Time skip. Konoha. Midnight. Forests behind the Hokage's monument. Currently we find Naruto jumping through the dense foliage, wearing a black hooded jacket. The blonde glanced at his wristwatch as he continued to dash through the forests. Just about time, he mused as after a minute, he reached a clearing by a river, connecting which was a beautiful waterfall. It was a sight to behold as the moonlight shone over the water like pearls. Landing beside the river, the blonde sat on a large rock as he waited for someone. Okay, calm down, tonight I'm going to find the bane of my existence. I hope I can take this well, he thought, a bit nervous as he closed his eyes, now breathing deeply to calm his nerves. Thup. Hearing someone land behind him, he turned around to find a hooded figure standing. This is it, Naruto thought as he slowly stood up, jumping from the large boulder to land in front of the hooded figure. Okay. The demonic secret, he said when the person started to speak in a monotone voice. 13 years ago, when Kyuubi attacked Konoha, the Yondaime couldn't kill it. Instead, he sealed that beast into a newly born child. That child is you, Uzumaki Naruto. That's the reason everyone hates you. Naruto's eyes widened as he stood there shocked. He should have known. So that's why the villagers always called him Demon. Why? Yondaime? The blonde muttered, his pupils trembling in shock while Naruto couldn't believe his ears. Now he knew why all those people repeatedly spoke about him killing their relatives and families whenever they beat him. They think I'm the Kyuubi, he thought, now the shock giving way to anger as Naruto gritted his teeth, clenching his fists in anger. You are a demon, you were the one that killed everyone 13 years ago. You killed your own parents. Because of you, Konoha is suffering even today. You will always be. Bhsht. Shut up, Naruto yelled as he punched the hooded figure on the face in blind rage, lifting the person off his feet as he landed on the ground. His hood now displaced as his face revealed itself to be Mizuki. The now defined Jinchuriki was heavily panting as he struggled to control his anger. You are all bastards. Assholes. Motherfuckers. Piece of shits. You think Kyuubi being sealed in me makes me the beast himself? The blonde yelled with closed eyes, panting a bit while Mizuki stood up, blood dripping down his chin as he stared at Naruto with an emotionless expression on his face. You idiots live in the world of shinobi, I am a ninja village. Don't you know the difference between a storage scroll and the sealed kunai? All those years you've been beating me for this? Because of your own misunderstanding? Because of your foolishness? He screamed in a quivering voice, letting out his frustration. Even though the blonde knew that Mizuki couldn't hear him, he had to let this out. His eyes were currently clenched shut, his fists trembling as Naruto stumbled back a bit. I can't cry. I wouldn't. He repeated this like a mantra, but it was useless as a stream of pearly liquid escaped from the confines of his closed eyelids, now sliding down his whiskered cheek while Mizuki stood there like a machine. My whole life, just because of that fucking Yondaime. Who gave him the right to fuck up my life? Just because he was the Hokage doesn't mean he can destroy anyone's life he wants. He bit his lower lip, wiping his tears with his shaking fists as he sniffed to hold himself together while a choked sob escaped his lips. Venting your frustrations and anger on me, beating me. You are the worst scums. All of you are the worst motherfucking scums. He let out a scream, dropping to his knees as the emotions the blonde has been holding back came flooding up to the surface in his emotionally shocked state. Calm down. Calm down, Naruto. I can't give up, I have to control myself, he mentally stated to himself, now taking deep breaths as the blonde wiped his tears. Out of range, he suddenly exclaimed in a stern voice after taking a deep breath while Mizuki turned around as he jumped on the branch of a tree and then left the area. Naruto, however, sat there on his knees as he took some time to compose himself. On a page of the Death Note, the conditions for Mizuki's death was that he would come at this exact location at sharp midnight. When he would hear the demonic secret, he would start telling Naruto of his views concerning why the villagers hate him, and then upon hearing out of range, he would travel a distance of 2 miles from this location, thus getting out of Death Note's range. Actually, he would only travel 1.6 miles from this location under Death Note's influence. And since the person himself doesn't know that he was being controlled, so upon getting out of Death Note's influence, Mizuki would just think he had come there from his apartment for a reason. That reason will depend on him, just like what had happened with the Hokage's tower staff. They thought what they had done was normal and that they did it for their respective reasons. One of the effects of Death Note on the people being controlled is stated in CH2. Konoha's streets. 1:07 a.m. After having taken some time to calm himself, Naruto had just spent half an hour gazing at the moon. It gave him a sense of peace. His mind was raging with all kinds of thoughts as he had struggled to hold himself together. Now that he thought about it, it shouldn't have been that shocking for him upon hearing the truth. He was ready for the truth actually. But what had really made him explode was the fact that his life was played by the Yondaime Hokage's heroic decision, played by people's misconceptions and their stupidity. But still, the blonde thought that he should have been able to control himself better back there. Currently we find him walking through the streets, hands in pockets as he stared at the ground. I need some sleep. Thank Kami, tomorrow's Sunday. I need some time to adjust myself. But now that I know the reason, I think I have a plan, he thought when. Crash. Gaw. The blonde exclaimed as a bottle, half filled with alcohol, crashed onto his forehead, making him fall on his butt as he began to writhe in pain. Found you, demon, a man exclaimed, coming out of an alley as he glared at the blonde who currently was holding his bleeding forehead. Clearly the middle-aged man was drunk as he approached Naruto. Grabbing his leg roughly, he began to drag the struggling blonde towards the alley. Arg. The blonde held his bleeding forehead, the pain being too much for him as he took off a piece of glass from his skin. Now in the dark alley, the man released his leg as he stumbled to sit over his body before grabbing the blonde's neck painfully, trying to squeeze the life out of him. Gurg. Choked sounds came from Naruto's lips while the man took out a kunai from the side of his gumboots to hold it above the blonde's forehead. Any last words? The man asked in a gruff voice, his breath reeking of alcohol while he loosened his grip on the blonde's neck a bit. Naruto took some deep breaths as he coughed a bit. Why? Your name, he stammered, reaching for a kunai in his pouch, on his right thigh. With his right hand while his left hand held the man's wrist on his neck. The drunken person chuckled a bit, recognizing the stupidity of the question even in his drunk state. Hee, the one to finally get rid of the demon, Mado Ayakashi. He exclaimed loudly, a sinister grin on his face as he brought down the kunai. Grabbing the approaching weapon at blurry speeds, the kunai going through the flesh of his hand, making the blonde grit his teeth in pain. He grabbed the man's hand, holding the kunai tightly as the blonde finally took out a kunai from his pouch. Squelch. To stab the man in his thigh, some drops of blood falling on the blonde's face. Arg. Ayakashi screamed in pain while Naruto pushed the kunai deeper in the skin with his right hand. Using impressive strength, the blonde sat up to punch the guy on his face, making him fall back as he clutched his broken nose in pain. Hopping back using a back flip, Naruto stood up while drops of blood streamed down his face with his forehead being completely red due to the red pigment. Squish. Gurg. The blonde growled in pain as he pulled out the kunai from his left hand. Taking out a paper from his pouch as well as a senbon which he rolled on his forehead to get some blood on it, he began to write the man's name on it along with his death conditions. Hey, Kyuubi is standing in front of you, what's wrong? Naruto mocked with a smirk, holding the page in his hands as the man slowly stood up despite the pain. Clearly he had to be a ninja, albeit in civilian clothes. Taking out the kunai from his thigh with a grunt of pain, the person glared at Naruto in blind rage while the blonde glanced at his watch. Why? You fucking demon! He exclaimed, now charging in blindly. Kunai reared to tear the demon in front of him while Naruto opened his arms wide, a dark smirk on his face as drops of blood fell off his chin. his cold oceanic blue eyes holding nothing but fearlessness. Die! The man yelled loudly as he went for Naruto's face, right between his eyes when suddenly the kunai stopped just inches away from the blonde's skin. What? What's wrong? Kill me, come on, don't you want to kill the Kyuubi? I destroyed this village 13 years ago, right? I must have killed your family, right? So what are you waiting for? Naruto taunted, his voice getting louder as he stared at the emotionless expression on the man's face who slowly retreated the kunai to turn its tip towards him. The smirk on the blonde's face widened as the tip of the kunai now faced Ayakashi's face. Squich. Droplets of blood sprayed over Naruto's spiky hair and his face as he stood there, never blinking his eyes while Ayakashi fell on the ground. Dead, his eyes still opened with the kunai stabbed deep into his forehead as blood flowed down his face. The smirk on Naruto's face slowly died down as he wiped the blood on his face with the Death Notes page, noticing that the deep cut on his forehead had already been healed. A serious expression now framed his face as he stared at the man, an emotionless look in his eyes. You are the ones who made me like this, the blonde whispered as he started to walk away. Now let's see if you can read this bastard's mind, Inoichi, cause there's none left. Konoha. Naruto's apartment, the following morning, Sunday, 10 a.m. After having killed some more criminals from the Sunday's newspaper, currently we find the blonde Jinchuriki lying on his bed as he stared at the ceiling blankly. Last night, after having received the shocker, Naruto couldn't sleep much. Also, he had to bandage the palm of his left hand, the palm through which the kunai had pierced a hole completely. And it was not a surprise that he woke up in the morning to find his hand completely healed. Now he knew that it must be because of the Kyuubi that he had such enhanced healing rates. And now, he was just gazing at the ceiling with half-lidded eyes, nothing going through his head right now. I just wish someone was there to love me. A thought suddenly invaded his mind as a tear rolled down his left cheek while he just kept on staring, not blinking his eyes. Knock. Knock. He blinked upon hearing his door being knocked. Sitting up, he jumped off the bed as the blonde walked towards the living room, wiping his cheeks in the process. Reaching his apartment door, he bent down to look through a small hole at the bottom of the door. Ninja sandals, so it's not a civilian, he thought before standing up, taking out a kunai from the sleeve of his black jacket before hiding the weapon behind his back. Opening the door slowly, he was surprised to see Shikamaru standing there, a lazy expression on the Nara's face as usual. Shikamaru? The blonde asked in surprise, his eyes a bit wide as the alarm systems in his mind went off. Why is Shikamaru here? He rarely comes to my apartment. Could it be that Shikaku sent him? He thought, whereas Shikamaru yawned. Well, I was getting bored as usual. The weather is clear today, so no clouds to watch, he spoke, making the blonde sweat drop before he burst into his foxy grin. So, what do you want to do? You didn't go to Choji? Naruto asked, making him shake his head. I was in the mood to play shogi actually, and as you know, Choji is no match for me in this. And you didn't sleep properly? You totally look like an insomniac today, he uttered, rubbing his back neck lazily while the blonde's eyes widened a bit. This means I have to go to his home. A possible confrontation with Shikaku then, huh? He pondered inwardly. Ah well, you see, I was just nervous about the exams and couldn't sleep, he verbalized with a sheepish grin when the Nara said. Let's just go. Tomorrow is our final exam, man, so troublesome. I just want to ease my nerves and see if I can finally beat you today. The grin on Naruto's face widened as he rubbed the back of his head. I see then, I don't have anything to do today. But a possible meeting with Shikaku, it should be interesting. I may be able to squeeze something out of him, he thought with an inward smirk. Sure. Just wait a sec here. Going inside, the blonde put on his ninja sandals before leaving his apartment. You're not going to lock the door? Shikamaru asked, making his expression drop a bit. No, it's no use. And there's nothing valuable in there, he spoke in a bit of sadness before bursting into a fake grin suddenly while Shikamaru stared at him with sadness in his eyes. Come on now, let's go, lazy ass. I can't wait to beat you again, he called over his shoulder, already on his way to the Nara's home, a grin on the blonde's face while Shikamaru chuckled to himself. Troublesome, he muttered under his breath, now following his blonde friend. Even if I hate most of this village, there are still some people very close to me, Naruto thought with a smile on his face, jumping through the rooftops as the wind ruffled his spiky blonde locks. Konoha. Nara clan estate. Shikamaru's home. You're losing again, Shikamaru. Naruto spoke with a chuckle, sitting opposite to that of the Nara with a shogi board between them on a small table. The lazy academy student however stayed quiet as he focused on the game, his eyebrows scrunched up in concentration. I'm home. Naruto's eyebrows lifted in what seemed to be surprise upon hearing that voice. That voice, so we finally meet, huh? He thought, a smirk on his face before it dissolved to form his usual goofy grin when the doors to their room slid open. Oh, Naruto? Shikaku exclaimed in surprise before he smiled at the blonde. Ohayo Nara-san, he greeted while Shikamaru was too concentrated on the game to notice anything else. The elder Nara smiled at the hyper-blonde as he walked to sit in front of the board game, in between the two players. So, I presume Naruto's winning like usual, huh? He asked with a chuckle while the blonde's eyes widened in shock upon hearing that. So Shikaku knew about him being good in shogi. Shit. How could I've overlooked this simple fact? What's wrong with me? Sleep deprivation is messing up with my thinking process, he thought, getting in mild panic, clenching his fists while Shikaku too, like Shikamaru, was analyzing the current state of the game. Now that he knows that I was just wearing a mask of being an idiot, his suspicion of me being Kira will only get stronger. I'm sure he already suspects me of being Kira. All this. His eyes inwardly widened in spine-breaking shock as he connected the dots instantly. So that's why Shikamaru rarely comes to my home, and today he came to ask me to play shogi with him, to come with him to his home when he could have just brought the shogi board itself to my apartment. It was all Shikaku's plan. He must have somehow coaxed Shikamaru into bringing me here, the excuse maybe being that he just wanted to see how good I was in this game. And then after some minutes after we had started playing, he comes home as if it was a coincidence. After coming home, he straightaway comes here and sits with us. Clearly this is his plan. But, is the whole Kissy involved in this? I can't imagine Gigi or Kakashi.ni.san suspecting me to be Kira. No, it can't be possible. I've influenced them with my idiotic self way too heavily. Probably this is Shikaku himself trying to solve the matter, and judging by Shikamaru's body language and his usual attitude today, he himself doesn't know of this. To him, we have just come to enjoy ourselves. But let's see what's his plan, now that I'm aware it's his doing. No way is he going to extract anything from me. He pondered, his palms getting a bit sweaty as he silently took some deep breaths while Shikaku didn't fail to notice this. You alright, Naruto? He asked with a smile, ticking the blonde inwardly. Look at that smile, he's mocking me. Yeah, it's just that I didn't sleep well yesterday. You know, the graduation exams are tomorrow, he answered with a smile making him nod. I see, well I really hope both of you pass, he uttered with a smile making him nod. Damn it. I give up. Shikamaru suddenly exclaimed as he raised his hands in defeat, sighing as he scratched his head while Shikaku and Naruto stared at him. You could have said checkmate earlier on instead of making me think all this time, the young Nara muttered, making the blonde rub the back of his head. Hee, sorry about that, Naruto spoke somewhat apologetically when Shikaku said. Hey, now let me play me against him. I want to see how good Naruto is to beat my son in this game. The elder Nara verbalized with a smile, making Naruto clench the fabric of his ninja pants under the table. I see, he wants to see what I'm really capable of. And now I can't deliberately hold back considering Shikamaru is sitting here and he might comment on me playing unusually bad when I had just beaten him. This will only fuel Shikaku's suspicion. He's forcing me to play like usual. That's why he first had Shikamaru play with me, the blonde thought as now Shikaku sat in front of him, the pieces back to their original positions with Shikamaru observing the game. Beat my old man for me, Naruto. I've never even come close to making him sweat in this game. I'm rooting you on. Shikamaru spoke in his usual laid-back way, making Shikaku chuckle as he made the first move while Naruto just snickered to himself. About 15 minutes had passed with both the sides having made only a few moves while Shikamaru sat patiently beside them, not having uttered a single word. Naruto, however, was simply perplexed. What's he doing? These recent moves, all of these all rookie level. Even Choji could play better than this. What is going in his mind? And why hasn't Shikamaru noticed this? Or is it that Shikaku himself has told him to stay quiet the whole time? Even Shikamaru has to know that his 2.san is playing like shit. And I myself can't hold back, or Shikaku will again get suspicious. On the outside, I'm just a hyperactive kid with an unusual talent in shogi. A kid like me will get ecstatic and try his wholesome best to beat a player like Shikaku. A kid like goofy Naruto can't possibly hold back deliberately. Kids just aren't like that. If they are good in something, they will boast about it and try to show it off. If I hold back, Shikaku will know that I'm not an idiot. He will know that besides shogi, I was also holding back in other areas. I guess I have to change my image a bit. The fact that I had strategic mind could be put under me using the common ninja tactic of deception. But any more than that, then Gigi and Kakashi wouldn't have a hard time in suspecting me to be Kira. Right now, I have to craft a new image of being the same idiot as before, a goofy and a knucklehead ninja, but with a gifted talent in shogi. Yeah, that is the image I have to create. I can't let them know of my real intelligence. I have to show them that my intelligence only works in case of shogi and that for the rest. I'm the same idiot Naruto, he thought, inwardly a serious expression on his face while on the outside he seemed to be concentrating on the game. Check. He spoke with a grin whereas Shikamaru and Shikaku both just stayed quiet and kept staring at the game. Yeah, I bet Shikamaru's in this. The fact that even now he didn't react to me checking his dad in just a few moves proves this. But let's see, does Shikaku plan to lose this game so early on? But, why would he do that? He thought, when Shikaku moved a piece, successfully protecting the king. Oh man! The blonde exclaimed with a pout making the elder Nara chuckle, though he had his own set of thoughts going on in his head. Naruto, if you really are Kira, which now I'm 80% sure that you are, then your acting skills are amazing. I can't help but be amazed by your ability to remain calm even in a situation like this, he thought, clearly impressed by the blonde. Again check. The blonde exclaimed when after a few seconds as Shikaku again evaded the attack making the Jinchuriki scrunch up his nose in irritation while the Nara clan head kept staring at him with Shikamaru just sitting there quietly, gazing at the game. About half an hour had passed now and the whole time, Naruto had been on the attack. Constantly, dotting the elder Nara while Shikaku continued to protect the king effortlessly. But during the last 10 minutes, it looked like Shikaku was gradually lifting his game, but still, only defending his pieces and not attacking at all. Naruto, however, was getting irritated over this. They were just wasting time like this, and the fact that Shikaku kept muttering, troublesome, over even the most dice things was getting to his head now. He's toying with me, only defending himself and not attacking at all. Fine then, I'll just end this game, he thought, his sleep deprivation leading to him being easily frustrated and angry. Check, he muttered, not so enthusiastically this time, moving a piece while Shikaku again defended his king. Another 20 minutes flied over the duo as they kept playing. Shikamaru, however, had his eyes widened in surprise. For the past 20 minutes, Naruto's game had gradually been lifting, going past the limits of what he usually played against him. These moves, they are really advanced. He's never played like this before, he thought in shock as the blonde found himself immersed in the game whereas Shikaku was inwardly smirking. Lifting his hand, Naruto approached a piece for another check. He knew he was just a few more moves away from checkmate-ing him. Just a bit and he will low. His hand though suddenly stopped, his eyes inwardly getting wide as the blonde slowly retracted his hand, feigning like he had changed his mind at the last second from moving a particular piece. Clutching his pants tightly, he lifted his gaze just a little bit, glancing at Shikaku through his bangs to see what seemed to amusement in his eyes. The feeling of accomplishing something. Shifting his gaze, he then noticed Shikamaru having a surprised look in his eyes. Damn it. So this was his plan. The bastard tricked me. That was the reason he started playing like a rookie from the start. He deliberately played bad in the beginning, urging me to finish the game. But as I gave him one check after another, gradually lifting my game to beat him, he too began to gradually lift his game, but so subtly that I wouldn't notice. He kept letting me check him continuously, making me get irritated so that I would at some point go past my limitations and try to beat him, and this, Shikamaru obviously didn't fail to notice. Judging by the surprised look on his son's face, Shikaku must have known that I was playing better than I usually do. Now he knows that I was holding even against Shikamaru. A person giving a player like him head-on competition in shogi. There's no way that person could be a goofy idiot like Naruto. A hyperactive kid like me was never supposed to be good in this game in the first place. And now he probably knows I'm hiding a lot more than a mere talent in a strategic game like shogi, he thought with an inward frown, his palms getting sweaty now while Shikaku gazed at the blonde. I have to lose this game, there's no other choice, but I can't suddenly start playing bad, he will get suspicious. Just like him, I have to gradually drop the level of my game, he thought, thinking up on his next moves. After about another 15 minutes, we find Naruto about to lose the game while Shikaku had a somewhat confused look in his eyes. I think I've seen what I wanted to. First you get past your limits, surprising even Shikamaru, and then, as if you had suddenly realized, your moves started to get careless. Right at that moment, when your hand had suddenly stopped when you were about to go for another check, you must have realized at that moment, huh? This proves it, you are hiding your true intelligence. Still, even though this doesn't connect to anything related to you being Kira. But now at least we know that you're not the idiot everyone thinks of you to be. This opens up the definite possibility that you could be Kira Naruto, Shikaku thought with a smirk, gazing at the blonde as he made another sloppy move. Check. Shikaku muttered, moving a piece while Naruto's eyes widened whereas Shikamaru just stayed quiet. This is not a simple check, it's a damn check. Mate, why doesn't he just say so and finish the game? Does he want to test me even further? But still, this does buy me some time to think over this. I'll just feign myself thinking of my next move when the game is already over, he pondered, his palm resting against his cheek as he pretended to be thinking while Shikaku again smirked. So now he's just buying time, huh? If he's able to beat Shikamaru, then he must know that it's a checkmate. The fact that he isn't saying something means he's probably buying himself some time, probably to calm his nerves. Getting tricked like this is ought to throw the temperament of even the cage-level shinobi. And he's just an academy student. Well anyway, phase 1 of my plan is a success, he thought before speaking. I'll come back in a second, have to use the toilet. And Shikamaru, make sure Naruto doesn't cheat, he spoke jokingly with a chuckle, leaving the room making the young Naru roll his eyes while Naruto just clenched his fists in anger. This is something I didn't expect. You're good, Shikaku. This was a good move, the blonde thought as he just sat there. You were playing really well back there, for a time I thought you really were going to win, Naruto, Shikamaru muttered, making him sigh as he rubbed his forehead. Well yeah, I thought too. But your dad's really something. I don't think anyone in Konoha can beat him, he spoke with a pout, making the young Nara chuckle. Yeah, he's really troublesome, he muttered when the door slid open after a minute as Shikaku entered to sit back on his place. So, any move from you, Naruto? He asked, making the blonde shake his head silently as he continued to pretend like he was thinking over his next move. Smirking a bit, the elder Nara then turned towards Shikamaru. So Shika, your exams are tomorrow, right? You think you're gonna pass? He asked, making his son sigh. I don't care, the exams are just so troublesome, the young Nara muttered, making his dad nod. Yeah, I understand, he spoke while Naruto just acted like he wasn't listening to them. So, what do you think of this, Kira? He asked Shikamaru, making the blonde grit his teeth, pursing his lips as he remained calm on the outside. Huh? Kira? Shikamaru asked, a bored expression on his face making Shikaku nod. He's a really troublesome one. I mean, killing all those criminals is okay with me, but the fact that those innocent civilians are dying just doesn't sit well with me, he uttered in a lazy tone. Yeah, innocent enough to beat an innocent orphan on daily basis, Naruto thought with some anger as he listened on to their conversation. Yeah, the civilians are now getting scared for their lives. Who knows who Kira is going to kill next, Shikaku spoke to himself with a sigh. What about you, Naruto? You shouldn't be too bothered by those civilians dying considering they scorned you for no reason at all, right? He asked with a smile while Shikamaru's eyes somewhat widened. This bastard, he's playing with me. He wants to get a reaction out of me. I have to remain calm, the blonde thought as he lifted his head, a surprised expression on his face. What? That's not the case. Kira is just a bastard. Even though some of those dead people hated me, I never hated anyone back. Yeah, I don't like them and would curse them in anger from time to time, but I would never wish death for them, he exclaimed with a frown, making Shikamaru smirk at him while Shikaku smiled innocently. That's the spirit, my boy, he chuckled. Spirit my ass. Just say that you weren't expecting that answer, Naruto thought with an inward HMPH. Now, I'm curious as to what you guys would have done if you were in the investigation in place of me. How would you have tried to approach this case if you only knew that victims of Kira only die of heart attacks? What would you have done, Naruto? He asked, a curious expression on his face as the blonde adopted a thinking pose. So, now you want a possible slip-up from me, huh? Asking me questions like this so that I may speak something which pertains to Kira's actions or his line of thinking. Well, tough luck, I'm not that easy to fool. Well, I would have a Yamanaka read the victim's mind to see if we can see Kira's face before he killed the victim. I mean, Kira has to be present at the site of death to kill anyone, right? He asked with a smile, making the young Nara nod while Shikaku stared at him with a serious expression on his face. Well, that's pretty normal. But still, for a kid like Naruto, it is a surprise that he was able to think even this much. Though he ought to know that in every investigation team, a Yamanaka is a must. He's dodging this very carefully, he thought, nodding at the blonde. Well, that's good thinking from you. But what if I told you that Kira doesn't need to be present at the site of death to kill his victims? Then what? In that case, I would go to Ichiraku's and think while eating a bowl of ramen. Ramen boosts my mind. He exclaimed with a goofy grin, making Shikamaru sigh in exasperation while Shikaku narrowed his eyes. The whiskered blonde, however, had come to a startling realization just a few seconds away while he was answering Shikaku's questions. T is not Shikaku. After having coming from that pee break, he straightaway started questioning us, talking about Kira. The way he's speaking is completely different than before. Shikaku would never call me my boy. The only one who calls me that is Ibiki. He's the one who talks like that. Moreover, the main thing is that he hasn't said troublesome even once after coming back, when instead before he had spoken troublesome so many times. It was troublesome this, troublesome that. If I have to bet, I would say that this is Morino Ibiki. He's also a member of Kissy after all. Well, your acting was good, but not flawless. And now it makes complete sense as to why Shikaku would switch places with him. After playing shogi with me and ending the game by checkmating me, he would excuse himself. And then after a minute or so, Ibiki would come here under a transformation technique, posing as Shikaku. He would then ask us questions casually, as if initiating a conversation with me and Shikamaru, when in fact, being the torture and interrogation specialist along with being someone who understands exactly how the human mind works, he would be testing me all the time. Watching my body language, my reactions and recording my each word very carefully. And I did partially fell into their trap actually. You are a genius, Shikaku. Just by knowing about the fact that I had beaten Shikamaru in shogi in every game we played, you were able to devise this whole plan. Your plan was good, for a normal criminal that is, however, not good enough for me. I've completely figured out your plan now though. Ibiki would just keep asking me indirect questions in front of Shikamaru. He will constantly try to mentally pressurize me, would try to squeeze something out of me which may prove that I'm Kira. Fine then, bring it on, I'll show you the experience I've gained from my childhood, he thought with a serious expression when he heard Shikaku speak. Oh Shikamaru, your mother was asking for you in the kitchen. You'd better go and ask her if she needs something. You know how she is, though by now she might be ready to hit us with a frying pan. He chuckled, making the young Nara mutter, troublesome, as he slowly stood up. Fine, I'll go. What does that woman needs now? He asked himself lazily, now walking towards the door. I'll be back in a minute, Naruto, the young Nara called over his shoulder before leaving the room. Right when the doors were slid shut, Shikaku's expression took a 180-degree turn. His smile quickly faded, being replaced by a serious expression as he now stared at the startled blonde with cold eyes. What is he planning now? Naruto thought, clutching his pants tightly as he readied himself for anything. But what he heard next, he wasn't ready for that, he definitely wasn't. Alright Naruto, now I'm going to say this directly. We, members of the Kissy group, know that you're Kira. The young Nara said, I'll be back in a minute, Naruto, over his shoulder as he walked out of the room. Shikaku turned an 80 degrees in his expression just as the doors were slid shut. His smile soon vanished and was replaced by a serious expression as he turned to face the shocked blonde, his eyes cold. What is he currently planning? Cradling his trousers firmly, Naruto prepared himself for whatever came next. He wasn't prepared for what he heard the next time, though, he most certainly wasn't. Alright Naruto, now I'm going to say this directly. We, members of the Kissy group, know that you're Kira. He sat there with a shiver down his spine and the blonde's pupil zoomed out in shock. There was silence in the room as his hands tightly gripped his pants. He stuttered, "W. What?" and looked at Shikaku with an awkward smile. "We know that you're Kira, as I said," the Nara repeated, giving a whiskered blonde laugh. Incredulous, he scratched the back of his head and said, "This has to be a joke, right? I mean, come on, me? Kira?" His face was expressionless. Well, up until now, he's been acting like he's not Kira. The boy ought to have displayed nervousness and anxiety if he had been. Ibiki, under the transformation, thought as he studied Naruto's every move with a serious expression on his face. Not once did his eyes widen. He said, widening Naruto's eyes before his features turned angry, "You entered the Hokage's office a week ago, and that's when Kira had also struck. A guy named Akabashi, who had beaten you in an hour before his death, was also killed by Kira. In fact, all the civilians who have despised you or have used violence against you have been dying daily. There are more evidences, but it's clear to us that you're Kira," he said. He let out a sigh, but Ibiki was unfazed, saying, "What are you talking about? I already told you that I'm not Kira. Me, a 12-year-old academy student, is killing all those people outside there. You've got to be kidding me." The torture expert beneath the henge said, grimly, "Fine then, I guess you should know the reasons as to how we got to know that you're Kira. I will tell you all the things that we've investigated so far," as Naruto's breath caught in his throat. Why would you act in that way?" As Ibiki began to tell him about their investigation from the beginning, relating everything in accordance with what Inoichi had told Naruto, he thought to himself. Suppressing a yawn, the blonde searched his mind for answers, the weariness from not being able to sleep the previous night starting to get to him. Not even his mind was operating at full capacity at this moment. But all of a sudden, the world stopped around him as the blonde realized what was going on, as if a bomb had been dropped on him. "I see now, Shikaku. This is a wise move. An excellent one," he thought to himself, his expression solemn but pretending to be surprised by what Ibiki was revealing about Kira. "Ibiki is sitting here observing every move I make and my body language. You're putting pressure on me by saying that in front of me when you guys can't possibly know if I'm Kira. You probably know that Kira is fully aware of everything you looked into up until yesterday morning because you had other Yamanaka check Inoichi's mind. You're having Ibiki alter some aspects of your actual investigation, though. In this manner, if I were Kira, I could finally bite my tongue and tell Ibiki the truth about what had actually happened. Which, given her age, was actually pretty expected. However, that's going to work," he thought as he listened to Ibiki with wide eyes. The blonde stayed silent, behaving as though she had never heard of this before and was hearing it for the first time. "So after asking the hospital staff, we came back to the Hokage's tower to check the staff's memories when he said." Ibiki said solemnly as she observed Naruto like a placid hawk, "And then yesterday, we found a blank in Inoichi's memories. Then we had devised a plan to counter Kira's ability to control us." "Well, so since Kira was aware of your investigation up until the day before yesterday, you could potentially alter some of the findings and share them with me. After all, if I were Kira, I wouldn't really know what transpired after Friday," he thought to himself. With an impressed expression on his face, Naruto exclaimed, "Whoa. So you mean to tell me that Kira had controlled Ino's dad on Friday, the day Kissy was formed? Wow. This Kira bastard sure is fast." Ibiki instinctively clenched his fist. What is happening? He is responding exactly like a typical individual who is unaware of the extent of our current investigation. Is it possible that Shikaku is mistaken? Nevertheless, it wouldn't surprise me if the boy picked up some acting abilities from living on the streets. Naruto turned to face the torture specialist as he said, "So afterwards, we have now top-class Anbu following our movements all the time. Shinkaku already knows that Kira needs his victims' personal information to control or kill them. Inoichi informed me about the investigation. That being said, why would Shikaku or any other Kissy member have these illustrious Anbu following them in high society? Shikaku wouldn't take such a chance. No, Ibiki is most likely lying to me about this. They like me to take action. Since the files pertaining to the renowned and elite Anbu are fairly easy to find and some other people, like those two old farts who they call elders, are aware of them, Shikaku would probably now expect me to try and steal the Anbu's files from Hokage's tower. Therefore, Kissy would likely rely on me to attempt to control those Anbu initially, leaving Inoichi with a gap in their recollections, and then attempt to control the Kissy members subsequently. Guess what, though? This is a game I can play too. Huh. That's stupid. Why have elite and famous Anbu follow you? whose identity Kira probably already knows since he did have access to some secret files in the Hokage's tower a week ago, instead of some newly formed ones whose identity no one knows. He asked, looking confused and making Ibiki's eyes widen in shock. The blonde smiled to herself. Did Ibiki-san catch you off guard, or what? He thought as he puzzledly stared at the Tokubetsu Junin. There's no way this boy could be Kira. He wouldn't have said what he just said if he were Kira. The recently appointed Anbu is already following us. However, Kira is unaware of this, and even if he were, he would not have informed us of a more effective way to oppose him. Rather, he would have continued to listen. Naruto isn't stupid enough to harm himself, even though he's a fantastic actor, he reasoned, starting to doubt that Naruto could be Kira. Huh. It can easily take you by surprise. Simply do something unexpected, wildly erratic, or suicidal, and you'll be taken by surprise. I'm sure he's thinking of how I could never be Kira. It's just too simple. Ibiki-san. You need to perform far better than that. The blonde Jinchuriki smirked to herself. I may not fully understand how a normal human mind functions like yours, but I'm not a normal human and I do completely understand how your mind works. Still, this is a wise decision on their part. It was a well-considered move to inform me of what they had decided to do in order to counter Kira. I will be exposed if Kira, who I am, behaves in accordance with this new knowledge. This renders them impervious to any subsequent Kira endeavors to decipher their thoughts, he contemplated, a sigh slipping from his mouth as his expression inwardly became solemn. It was a very wise move, as I can no longer effectively control any member of Kira. Even if I did manage them and force them to perform tasks for me in some way, Anbu would tell the Kissy and they would discover that Kira is aware that Anbu is watching them. In addition, aside from Kissy, I am now aware that Anbu is pursuing them, which means I will be exposed right away. Furthermore, according to what Ibiki has told me, they are most likely prepared for it if I try to obtain the Anbu files from Hokage's office. Probably out of the question going forward is controlling any Kissy member. I'm at a loss now for what they've investigated. There may be a workaround for this, though, and I don't believe I should use it. Ibiki narrowed his eyes and said, You caught it. I guess you really are not the knucklehead idiot everyone thinks of you. I wonder how much you're hiding, Naruto. We never assigned a lead Anbu in the first place. It was just to test you. The Anbu watching me right now and the other ones are all newly appointed ones, but they are really capable. Ibiki, screw you. You've now also informed me of this. Right now, there's no way I could obtain any kind of Anbu file. Ibiki's bold disclosure of their true strategy indicates that Kissy is prepared to face any fallout. And I am Kira, by their reckoning. Thus, Kira and I might use a fact that only Kissy and I are supposed to know in our actions, which would lead to my being caught. From now on, I have to exercise extreme caution because I can't possibly follow Ibiki's advice about what they did yesterday. Ibiki, still under the henge, said, Now you see. All the evidence points in your direction, boy, with a somber expression that caused the blonde to sigh in frustration. He said gravely, his eyes icy blue, as Ibiki looked back at him, I'm still saying that I'm not Kira. Maybe this Kira hates me like all those villagers and wants to frame me. Maybe you guys are hell-bent on proving me as Kira because you hate me too, he continued. The bearded blonde said softly, You know what you have points towards me being Kira. But you do not have any solid proof of me being Kira. With a sly smile that caused the blonde's eyes to enlarge slightly, the Tokubetsu Junin asked, If you're not Kira, then you wouldn't mind us going through your memories, right? The torture expert questioned, What? Are you scared that we might find out how you've been killing all those people this past week? This is the final exam. After this, we'll find out what your real story is, Naruto. The bearded man sat there with his fists clenched, his lips curling upward and his eyes averting slightly. With a strange, excited gleam in his cold, electric blue eyes, Naruto raised his head and smirked at the torture expert while gazing at Ibiki through his bangs. Ibiki's eyes widened in shock as he said, Be my guest, but he soon composed himself. He nodded at the blonde and said, Okay, then we'll go through your memories after the graduation exams. The Tokubetsu Junin sighed and thought gravely, I have to ask Hokage Sama to assign Anbu guards to the strong members of the Yamanaka clan as if Naruto is Kira. He may use a Yamanaka to have memories of when he had killed the victims be erased. Listen, Naruto. I understand the kind of life you have led. Being you is nearly impossible for a normal human. And I really respect you for the way you have dealt with the challenges in your life thus far. But revenge is something that destroys a person from the inside out. It's like a poison which slowly eats you out, Ibiki said, his brunette eyes narrowing as he clenched his fists in rage. He spoke in a sympathetic tone, his face soft. I know that those civilians are the culprits. But you don't have to kill them, he said. Ibiki smirked behind her closed eyes as Naruto roared, how many times do I have to tell you that I'm not Kira? Just one more, please. The Junin said with relaxed facial features, you don't even have to admit to us that you're Kira, and we wouldn't try to catch you or punish you for your crimes so far if you stop killing people from now on, whether they be criminals or not, as Naruto bit the inside of his mouth harshly in an attempt to calm himself. The blonde spat slowly, each word like poison as he gave the Tokubetsu Junin a cold snarl that was brimming with revenge. His voice growing louder, the blonde with his head lowered and his bangs shadowing his eyes, he continued to question, then why are you getting so angry? Is it because you don't like me calling those civilians innocent when they had beaten you since you were thrown out of the orphanage? Is it because I'm showing you pity? Is it because here I am, preaching you like I know your life and doesn't understand the pain you've gone through? Is it because I cannot understand your justice? Shut up, Naruto said coolly, his voice demonic as he sensed the blonde's foul aura spreading, causing Ibiki's eyes to widen. The Junin's breath caught in his throat as Naruto raised his head and saw red orbs with a thin black slit in them that were brimming with rage, hatred, and malice. The killer intent that Naruto was inadvertently releasing in his enraged state paralyzed him. Calm down, Naruto, he managed to say without faltering as Naruto slowly got to his feet and turned to face the door. Ibiki let out an indiscernible sigh of relief, and the mustachioed blonde began to walk towards the door without a word. It's unbelievable that I just saw Kyuubi's eyes. We need to be careful not to bring up this topic in front of Naruto again. However, the fact that he became irate when I asked him questions suggests that he despises the villagers. It seems as though he had been acting the entire time, acting as though their glares and actions had no effect on him. Ibiki turned his head at the sound of the door being slid open, thinking, he was fooling all of us all along. Ibiki was shocked as Naruto said in a low voice, it's a shame that the guy who completely understands how a human's mind works cannot understand me. He always knew it was me. By the way, based on what you've told me so far. I think it's obvious that you try on selling different newspapers, featuring different criminals, to different districts of Konoha. Since Kira requires the victim's personal information, newspapers are probably the best source of information for him. The one who dies, corresponding to the newspaper in which he was published, will tell you the district from where Kira is operating, he whispered quietly, causing Ibiki's eyes. On Tuesday, we were going to carry out the same action. If he is indeed Kira, then why would he advise us to take that action? Oh no, it is incredibly perplexing. He appears to be Kira at times, but other times he appears to be just a regular ninja hiding his abilities through deceit. Ibiki was thinking to himself, frustrated, I don't think we can deduce anything from what happened today, staring at the blonde's back. He said, bitterly and sarcastically, oh, tell Shikamaru that I had to do something important. By the way, I really enjoyed this conversation with you, and turned to walk away. Oh no, after all that effort, we were only able to confuse ourselves more. However, we are aware that he is not the fool that everyone believes him to be. Naruto's apartment in Konoha, a few minutes later. With a furious look on his face, the blonde punched the wall and yelled, damn you. Naruto growled in a low voice, trying to calm himself, how dare they? He pushed his fist against the wall in frustration and spat through gritted teeth, how dare they preach me like that? They think that they know everything, they think that they understand my pain huh? Even after witnessing what those bastard civilians have been doing to me, they still have the gall to make me understand that revenge is not everything. His features tightened into a deep frown, his eyes squeezed shut as he inhaled deeply to calm himself. I would not have to worry about them altering the content of the district. Specific newspapers at least now. Now that Ibiki is aware that I personally advised them to take this action, and if they continue to think I'm Kira, they will likely assume I have a back-up plan because a normal criminal would never advise doing anything that would work against their interests. It was a wise last-minute decision. The bearded blonde pulled his right fist off his bedroom wall and opened his eyes to look at the fake tile that lay right behind him. If I could just kill Shikaku, it would be so much easier, but I wouldn't. I have morals and codes that I must uphold. He thought to himself, determination starting to seep through his system. I wouldn't just kill anyone who gets in my way. The blonde approaching his window and now staring out. Shinkaku, I take up your challenge. With a sly smirk on his lips and icy eyes that had a predatory expression, he said to himself, I would face you head on, without killing any of you. Monday at 8:03 a.m. at T&I head office. Hiruzen's voice was low and carried a hint of anger. Shikaku, with whose permission did you pull that stunt yesterday? Kakashi's eyes were narrowed as well. It was evident that the Sharingan user and the Hokage were not pleased with this. After checking each member's memory for any potential gaps, Inoichi stood silently. Hokage Sama, I know that I disobeyed your orders. But believe me that whatever I did yesterday was aimed for the better of the village. Shikaku sighed as Ibiki intervened. Hiruzen and Kakashi's eyes widened in shock at that statement. We are ready to bear the consequences for not following your orders. But I want to inform you that Naruto is not the idiot everyone thinks him to be. In fact, if I had to take a guess, I'd say he's about at Shikaku's level when it comes to mental strength. Kakashi, displeased with their stubborn behavior regarding the blonde Jinchuriki, said in a cool, collected voice, Are you serious? Do you even know what you're talking about? An overactive kid like Naruto, matching Shikaku? I knew that he was holding back, but it can't be this much. If Naruto was this much of a genius, then his curtain of deception must have had slipped from time to time. No one can hold that much of their abilities. What you're saying is complete opposite of the Naruto we in the village know. That's the exact thing that makes him a genius. Kakashi, someone unlike anyone we've ever encountered. The fact that he was able to completely block his real personality from everyone in the village, from even the most elite of shinobi here, proves that he's really something. Probably the best deception specialist in the world. And his acting skills are flawless. You can't possibly tell if he's lying or not, the Nara said while clenching his fist. With a frown, he said, I'd like to hear your story regarding what you did yesterday. Kakashi questioned in shock, Hokage Sama, you're believing them? Calm down, Kakashi. If Shikaku is stating all of this with so much confidence and the fact that he took the risk of going against my will, there must be an element of truth in what they're saying. Let's hear it. Shikaku. Ibiki, I want you to tell everything what happened yesterday, the instructor said with a glum look on his visage. Although he had heard the Anbu's rough account of what had happened to Shikaku and Ibiki, he was aware that the Nara's explanation would shed light on a whole new aspect of what had actually transpired yesterday. Ninja Academy in Konoha. 10:43 a.m. Seated next to Mizuki, who was now glaring at the blonde in front of them, Iruka said gravely, Okay, Naruto, I want you to produce at least 3 clones of yourself. With a nod toward the pair, the blonde started to develop his chakra and created the Ram seal. He yelled, Bunshin no Jutsu, clone technique, while tightly shutting his eyes. Oof. Iruka's eyebrows started to twitch as he stared at the dead clone the blonde had created, and Mizuki gave the blonde a pitying smirk because he was now grinning awkwardly and appeared nervous. Naruto's shoulder slumped and his eyes lowered, not looking at the wooden floor, as Iruka yelled, You fail. The blonde Jinchuriki narrowed his eyes and glared at the silver-haired Chunin. Iruka, what do you mean we cut him some slack? I mean, he has failed the graduation exams twice now, Mizuki said with a kind smile. But Iruka, staring at the miserable existence that was the blonde's clone, sighed with exasperation. It's not possible, Mizuki. Every student who passed today was able to create 3 clones, and Naruto is here, he said, trailing off as he looked at the clone with a serious expression on his face and a clenched fist. He lowered his head and moved toward the door before leaving the examination room, leaving Mizuki with a small smirk on his face and Iruka with a dejected expression in his eyes. Konoha. Location unknown. 11:41 a.m. But I really wanted to graduate this time, Naruto said, sitting on the edge of a roof with Mizuki, looking out at the streets with a dejected expression. A breeze slid past their forms and the silver-haired Chunin smiled. Iruka only wants what's better for you, Naruto. He can't just send you out in that dangerous world of shinobi without you being fully prepared for it. It's just that he can be a little harsh sometimes. He looked from the corner of his eye to his right and said, But I try to give it my all. I trained very hard for his exam. It's just, no matter how hard I try, I can't do the clone technique. His expression was serious. It doesn't seem like anyone is watching us, but still. With a sly smile that caused the blonde's eyes to widen, the Chunin said, Well, since you're so desperate to pass, I think I can let you on in a little secret to pass the graduation exams. Konoha. 8:51 p.m. Right now, Naruto is racing through rooftops at a blurry speed, hurrying toward the Hokage's tower while wearing a gloomy expression. He glanced at his wristwatch and thought, a minute left, as the blonde picked up her pace. He was wearing a black jacket instead of his typical orange one, and dark blue pants, preferably for stealth. Glancing back, he said, "Hey, what's the hurry?" and saw Ryuk flying behind him. The Shinigami questioned, "And you haven't even told me your plan. What the hell are you trying to do?" Naruto simply ignored him and kept running towards the tower, jumping to the ground as soon as he saw it in sight. "I have also escaped the guards," he thought to himself as the blonde ran across the top of the tower, taking the back way so as to avoid being discovered by the guards stationed at the entrance. Usually, the roof was also left unattended. He looked at his watch again shortly after the blonde had landed on the roof. "Don't you think it's risky standing here? Anyone can spot you right now if they look closely, you know. But I guess your black dress does help a bit," the Shinigami said, laughing. Naruto narrowed his eyes and glared at the Shinigami in annoyance when all of a sudden he saw Hiruzen standing in front of him and holding a large scroll. A forbidden scroll, to be exact, when he snapped his head back. Ryuk stood there, staring at the Hokage as he dropped the scroll and puffed back into smoke, disappearing from sight. Ryuk said, "What was that? You controlled this old man? I thought you said that you wouldn't control him," as Naruto carried the forbidden scroll on his back. Disregarding the Shinigami, he leapt from the roof and headed for the stairs that would take him to the forests behind the Hokage monument on the cliff above. Forests behind the Hokage's monument several hours later at 11:19 p.m. Iruka yelled, "Found you," as he landed on the ground in front of the blonde, who was sitting and now panting from exhaustion. "Ehehe. You found me this time too, sensei," said Naruto, grinning sheepishly as Iruka's frown grew deeper. The Chunin said, scolding the mustachioed blonde, whose expression changed to one of perplexity. "You've really crossed the line this time, Naruto. Do you have any idea what you've done this time?" The blonde said, "What are you talking about, Mizuki? Sensei told me that if I could successfully steal the forbidden scroll and learn a jutsu from it, then I would pass the test," which caused Iruka to widen her eyes. "Mizuki?" To the further surprise of the Chunin in front of him, he exclaimed with excitement, "Yeah. And I even managed to learn TW.1 jutsu here from the scroll." But then Naruto's eyes widened abruptly. "Whoosh! Watch out!" exclaimed the blonde as he dove into his sensei's embrace and knocked him to the ground. A moment later, multiple shurikens sliced through the air, where Iruka had been standing, and lodged themselves in the bark of a tree. They both got to their feet, and Iruka's eyes narrowed with realization. "Wow, for a dead last, you sure have impressive reflexes, you demon. So it was your plan all along, huh?" Iruka angrily exclaimed, glaring at the silver-haired Chunin with a smirk on his face as Naruto looked wide-eyed at Mizuki. He asked in a bewildered tone, clenching his fists, "Hey, what's going on here?" Iruka put an arm in front of Naruto defensively, a serious expression on his face. The bearded blonde narrowed his eyes and glared at Mizuki while clenching his fists. "You were tricked by Mizuki. There's no other way of passing the exams. He lied to you," the Chunin said gravely. Mizuki, now crouching on a high branch in front of the two, uttered loudly with a staid look on his face. "You don't have to glare at me like that. I think you should direct all that hate towards the villagers, Naruto. What I lied to you today is nothing in compared to the huge lie that the village has been telling you all along your life." Iruka's eyes widened in horror. He yelled, "Don't you dare, Mizuki!" But the silver-haired Chunin chose to ignore him. Dodging some kunai thrown by Iruka, Mizuki continued, "Don't you ever wonder as to why they hate you so much? Why you were always alone, ignored like you didn't even exist?" With a serious expression on his face, Naruto questioned, "What secret?" while Iruka gritted his teeth in frustration and Mizuki's lips formed a dark smirk. 13 years ago. "No, Mizuki, sensei!" Iruka yelled as he snapped his head at the blonde, hearing Naruto scream at him. Mizuki's eyebrows lifted in amusement as he surreptitiously untied the Fuma shuriken on his back. The blonde Jinchuriki growled, making the Chunin's eyes widen. "I want to hear why everyone hates me. It's time I know the truth. Don't you dare stop, Mizuki, sensei." Iruka abruptly stopped speaking as he felt the cold metal of the kunai against his neck, his eyes widening in shock. "Naruto, you don't understand. It's for your own. It's time I know everything. And I wouldn't stand for anyone interfering in this, not even you, sensei." Whatever, Mizuki. Sensei says, I can handle it. I'm not the idiot kid you think I am, the blonde said icily, causing Iruka to stand there dumbfounded. A clone in shadows. A clone was standing behind his crouching form with a kunai, he thought incredulously as he continued to stare out of the corner of his eye at the real Naruto, who was standing a meter next to him. Iruka. It looks like he's eager to know the dirty secret, huh? Mizuki laughed teasingly as Iruka clenched his teeth. The silver-haired Chunin trailed, a smirk on his face as Iruka closed his eyes. Alright Naruto, listen here. You about the old story of Yondaime killing the Kyuubi 13 years ago, right? Well, the textbooks lied to the students of your generation. The truth is that the Yondaime Hokage couldn't kill a tailed beast like Kyuubi. So instead, he sealed the beast in an orphan. An orphan who would be hated by the villagers, an orphan condemned to a life of misery and suffering. Eh? And that orphan is me? Mizuki grinned as Naruto stammered, his eyes expanding. Take a wild guess, demon, he yelled, causing the blonde to bow his head and tremble with his fists, while Iruka remained silent. Oof. The blonde slowly dropped to his knees, his eyes hidden behind his bangs as Iruka charged at him, and the shadow clone vanished. Naruto. I have to duck just in time, squelch. Sensei? Naruto asked, staring up at the Chunin with wide eyes while Iruka coughed lightly and blood started to drip down his chin. Mizuki's gaze broadened as he gazed at the back of his fellow Chunin, the Fuma shuriken embedded in his skin. Shit. Why was he forced to intervene? In any case, I was going to avoid. Naruto. The blonde said, holding himself up with his arms as he coughed, her wide-eyed gaze fixed on the Chunin. Why? He asked, shocked by the Chunin above him's actions. Why did you? I understand how it feels to be alone and without parental guidance. He murmured, believe me, I understand the feeling, as Naruto narrowed his eyes and glared at Iruka. You are ignorant, he retaliated angrily as Iruka shut his eyes. I am aware. I am not aware of everything you went through, but I am aware of some of it. I understand that Naruto feels hurt, but please never think less of yourself than those other villagers. The fact that you've been through so much and are still sane is what makes you unique, he whispered, causing the blonde's eyes to enlarge as he listened quietly. Mizuki was also standing there silently, wearing a frown. Never believe that you are a demon. There are people out there who genuinely care about you. Please don't change who you are. Be the page person that you are, Naruto said, lowering his head to wipe away a tear from his eye, then slowly rising to his feet. Ah, Iruka, that is so sensitive now. Mizuki laughed as Naruto approached Iruka, a serious look on his face as the silver-haired Chunin leapt to land in front of him. Jumping in to save your student like that before delivering the final lecture of your life, Mizuki cried. Well, you don't appear to be all that affected. Is it possible you were aware of the secret beforehand? Mizuki asked in a lighthearted manner, causing the blonde's eyes to enlarge slightly. What are you doing, Naruto? Be not stupid. Take the scroll with you and run. As he removed the shuriken from his back, Iruka cried out. Jutsu Bunshin no Kane. The blonde with whiskers exclaimed, shadow clone technique, making the crisscross sign with his hands while 6 clones poofed slightly next to him. Iruka thought to herself as he sat with his back leaning against a tree trunk, it's amazing that he can still create shadow clones after having only learned the technique itself. He clearly seems to be exhausted, he must be low on chakra. I'm impressed. You couldn't even carry out a basic cloning technique, and now look at you. Using a prohibited technique. Iruka's eyes widened in disbelief as Mizuki smirked and said, maybe you could have become the Rookie of the Year instead of the Uchiha if we hadn't interfered with your progress in the academy. They let him down on purpose. The clones pulled out a kunai and ran towards the Chunin, not saying anything. Then we'll reveal to you who the true novice in this situation is. As the clones approached Mizuki, they screamed, standing there with a sly smile on his face. He dodged the clones' barrage of punches and kicks, dispatching each one of them with a single blow. Naruto. It's useless. I'm telling you, nothing compares to Mizuki. Grab the scroll and make a beeline for the village. Iruka watched the two and cried out through gritted teeth because the pain was too great. The genuine Naruto, on the other hand, clenched his fists and looked at his wristwatch while standing there with a composed expression. He raised his head and gave a sly smile to the Chunin with silver hair who squinted. "You monster, I'll wipe that smirk off your face," he bellowed, then vanished from the blonde's view. Wham! Oh! Mizuki, who had appeared behind the Jinchuriki, gave him a back kick that sent him flying off his feet. The blonde skidded to a stop, the forbidden scroll lying next to him. "Oh no!" Iruka clenched his fist, unable to do much with his injuries, and exclaimed breathlessly. Mizuki said, "It's time to get rid of you," as he approached the blonde who was standing unsteadily and had his head lowered as the Chunin began to go through several hand seals. "Demon, say hello to the Shinigami for me." As he completed the hand signs on the Tora, tiger, seal, he exclaimed. "Run, Naruto." The blonde was grinning and staring at his watch as Iruka bellowed loudly as he struggled to stand. "Were you aware that Shinigami adore apples?" With a tiny smirk on his face and shadowed eyes, he muttered, while Mizuki took a deep breath. "Kaden. Gukaku." The Chunin staggered back, his eyes widening and mouth opening in silent agony. Drawing a kunai from his pouch, Naruto lunged towards Mizuki with a blurred speed, much faster than before. His velocity, Iruka thought in dismay. Quick. Aarrgghh. My cries slowly went silent as his eyes closed, his previously flailing arms now laying still, while Naruto's eyes widened in horror. Mizuki yelled as the kunai pierced the left side of his chest, where his heart was located. Drops of blood sprayed onto Naruto's face as Mizuki fell on the ground with the blonde above her. The kunai deeply lodged into the flesh as the Chunin writhed in pain. "Naruto!" The blonde Jinchuriki staggered back in what appeared to be shock from his first kill, and Iruka called out in shock, not believing what he was seeing. What am I guilty of?" I could hear the fear in his voice as he stammered, but he was smirking to himself. "I was dying to kill the bastard with my own hands anyhow, so that's taken care of."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.